That girl was such a sad sack even her own family used her like a doormat. Meet Lunathia Hassel, the second daughter of the Hassel clan. She was practically yanked out of bed by her brother's booming voice calling her name. The oldest brother's soul flashed her a grin so bright it could light up a room. He plopped on the bed like he owned the place and bragged about his big exam today. He was one step closer to becoming a knight, just like their dad had always daydreamed about. So he started begging Lunathia for a glimpse into the future. Funny how he only remembered she existed when he wanted something, huh? Luna tried to explain how serious the consequences of that could be, but nope, he was on a roll, pestering her to just tell him the answers. She was about to fake a headache, but then her sister swooped in. Rosalind strutted in with Cynthia and began showering Luna with sweet nothings. She stepped closer and gave Luna a hard time for still being in her pajamas. Apparently, she was on a mission to wake her up so Dad wouldn't throw a tantrum. Luna attempted to share her side of the story, but her explanation got shut down faster than a door in a storm. Rosalind just casually claimed it was her job to clean up Luna's messes. That got Luna's blood boiling. Her big sister flipped the script, demanding to know her future in return. She waggled her hand and started blabbing about some big deal she had the next day. She wanted to know if her mine investment would pay off. With a smile plastered on her face, she went on about how this was all for their family's sake. Luna dug in her heels, insisting it was draining her batteries. Cynthia looked concerned, thinking Luna was catching something. She piped up, requesting a peek at her own future 3 days from now instead of Rosalind's. She was just curious about something trivial, like what dresses the ladies-in-waiting would be flaunting at the ball. She wanted to waltz in wearing something that would turn heads and drop jaws. Soon, the three of them started squabbling over who got their future read first. Each of them threw out reasons that they believed were absolutely vital. Eventually, they all stared at their sister like a pack of hungry vultures. In every single generation of the Hassel clan, a child popped out with the gift of foresight. That lucky kid sported a massive birthmark on his chest like a badge of honor. This ability was the family's secret weapon, but even they weren't supposed to overuse it. Lunathia had pushed it too far, which led to her losing sight in one eye. Rosalind, the golden child of the family, was followed shortly by the long-awaited son, Sol. Even though they were twins, Mom and Dad treated him like royalty, totally forgetting Luna existed. They basically left her to gather dust. 5 years later, Cynthia popped out, stunning everyone with her beauty. Just like that, they became the picture-perfect family, leaving Luna in the shadows. She was just a dim reflection compared to the adored Hassel siblings. They only remembered Luna once her powers kicked in, which was a bittersweet victory. But soon enough, the family's greed started to tear her apart. One day, she overheard that some guy named Maris was on the hunt for a bride. Everyone was betting that this lucky lady would live in the lap of luxury. Those rumors gave Lunathia a glimmer of hope in Marquis a hot-headed war hero who was also easy on the eyes. His assistant, Urin, cheekily announced he had another letter to deliver. Knox casually started reading a letter from the Viscount's daughter. He calmly instructed his assistant to fire off a polite rejection. Urin boldly asked how long he was planning to keep this charade up. Everyone knew he was just covering for his pal the prince, who was also hunting for a bride. He snickered, suggesting he should just get hitched instead of playing with these young women's hearts. But Lord Knox just tossed the letters aside like yesterday's news. Urin scrambled to gather the fallen pages and noticed something strange about the new letter. It seemed that awkward jab had caught the guy's attention. Urin figured the letter was from the lady herself, not from her father. That hinted strongly that the Hassel family's daughter had her eyes set on becoming his wife. Urin agreed, concluding that she was definitely interested. Knox was deep in thought, mulling over his choices. Finally, he jumped up and ordered his crew not to respond to that girl. Urin asked with a smirk if he actually wanted to meet her face to face. He just shrugged on his coat, saying that woman might just cure his boredom. From that moment on, there wasn't a single day where Lunathia didn't think about that letter. That dude was known as the Moonator, and he had quite the reputation. Despite his fame, he tucked away in a mansion far from the hustle and bustle. Rumors swirled about him because of his, let's say, questionable hobbies. Some even whispered that he could leave an enemy in a rather sticky situation. As soon as news broke that he was on the hunt for a bride, nobles began flooding him with letters. Luna knew she had to make a lasting impression, or she'd be toast in her own family. It looked like the maid noticed her change in mood and decided to pry. Luna wasn't about to spill her secrets about what gnawed at her. The staff already knew her fiancé was on his way today to solidify their arrangement. But then the girl remembered a major glitch. She had inherited memoirs from her ancestors and had to continue writing in them. Trouble was, little Soleil dropped that darn book in the pond. Lunathia managed to rescue bits that warned against overdoing it. It mentioned that eventually a person could lose all 5 senses. That resonated since she was already blind in one eye. She recalled how much that new info had jolted her. It was a real brain buster for her to wrap her noggin around the fact that she could be wrecking her own vibes. She caught a glimpse of her reflection looking like a deer in headlights, twisted with fear. Luna had never ventured into this territory before, but here it was. The moment she decided to peek into her own crystal ball for the first time, the girl tapped on the mirror and asked it to show her what she was really wishing for. In the blink of an eye, everything around her was swallowed by pitch-black darkness. Suddenly, she realized she was as numb as a spoon. Her body and mind felt like they were trapped in a vacuum, the kind that makes living a total no-go. The memoir warned that if you lost one sense, the others might just decide to take a hike too. After reading this, Lunathia threw in the towel and set the book aside like a hot potato. Now she was determined to live this year exactly how she wanted, so she wouldn't end up with a bag full of regrets later. She was so deep in thought that she completely zoned out on everyone around her. The girl practically leapt out of her skin when someone grabbed her. Right in front of her stood Rondell, an Imperial Knight from the 2nd Division. Lunathia wasted no time giving him a piece of her mind for sneaking up on her like that. When he saw her annoyed face, he figured she was about as happy as a cat at a dog show. He smirked and said he just wanted to check in on his future wife. Rondell also mentioned that Soleil and Cynthia would be thrilled to see him too. At first, she thought this guy was a real gem understanding and someone she could totally vibe with. She used to think nobody would ever ask for anything from her again. Lunathia decided to cut through the fluff and hit him with a favor request. Guess what? All he wanted was a sneak peek at his future. Once again, it was clear he couldn't care less about her feelings. His family was known for cranking out legendary knights like it was a factory job. Even so, Rondell wasn't exactly winning any sword-fighting awards. As her future hubby, he always played the I need your gift card, and it had gotten him pretty far. She wanted to ditch him faster than a hot potato, and that's why she was on the hunt for a new husband in the first place. Meanwhile, he kept trying to pull strings to score what he wanted. Lunathia felt a tidal wave of disgust wash over her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to argue, but the maid piped up that a letter had arrived. The girl froze like a deer in headlights, guessing it was from that man. She flipped a switch and told Rondell he was off the hook just like that. He started to protest, but she gave her fiancé a frosty goodbye. After that, she totally wiped him from her mind and got down to writing. She glanced at the letter and realized it was from the Moon Eater. That very night, the girl set off to his creepy mansion. The mayors invited her for a private meeting, leaving the family shocked. Not too long ago, she'd mentioned this meeting over dinner. The man was flabbergasted and asked if she even knew what she was saying. He was taken aback by his daughter's unexpected guts. He slammed his fist on the table, reminding her how vital their alliance with the allowed son was. Marquis Hassel was absolutely fuming about his daughter's choice. The girl tried to keep her cool and asked him to hear her out. She reached for her glass, but she was shaking like a leaf and couldn't grab it. Luna realized she'd knocked a knife off the table and it clattered to the floor with a dramatic flare. Nicholas sighed totally over it and called his daughter a klutz. He waved a hand at a servant, ordering them to replace the silverware. The guy's face darkened as he started listing her many screw-ups like a bad report card. He claimed she owed it to her family to help them by peeking into their futures. She was disgusted. That's all he ever talked about. His wife, Senrea, jumped in backing up her husband's diatribe. She brought up Rosalind, who kicked butt by starting her own business and supporting her family. Even Sol was hustling hard to become a high-ranking knight for the family's sake. She even mentioned Cynthia, who was carefully on the prowl for her future husband. The old lady wrapped it up by saying Luna should also be doing something for the family. She brought all this up just to slam the door on my request to break off the engagement. Rosalind immediately asked if I had a spat with Rondell. Cynthia jumped in saying we shouldn't call off the engagement, so they started talking about how Rondell had been there for me when the chips were down. All their words only reinforced to Luna that they didn't give a hoot about what she wanted. Finally, Nicholas stood up and said he needed to mull over my proposal. After that, all the family members clicked away, like a bad signal leaving her alone. Luna wasn't sure if she should spill the beans about the moon's invitation. She knew for darn sure she couldn't back down now. She had to capitalize on the fact that she'd caught the eye of someone like that. After a while, they finally rolled up to the warrior's castle. The girl was buzzing with excitement and tried to hop down, but she twisted her ankle. She quickly clutched the door to keep from face-planting. She felt once again how tricky it was to live with just one eye. Oh, the coachman tried to clue her in on how dangerous this neck of the woods was. He suggested she not venture any further if she was that spooked. Still, she had this gut feeling like she was born to be right here, right now. She said her goodbyes to the driver, thanking him for the ride. Lunathia smiled and wished him a future brimming with good times and good fortune. Meanwhile, the Marquis was already buzzing with anticipation for their meeting. Urin asked, "Does my being here really float your boat that much?" He was right, and in just a couple of minutes, she was standing right in front of him. Lunathia offered a polite greeting to Mark Iltern. She walked forward, not even noticing there was a table in her path. Next thing you know, she tripped and nearly ate it hard. She flashed an awkward grin and chirped, "Oops, seems like I need to tune into my surroundings better." The guy picked up on the fact that she was blind in her right eye faster than a cheetah on roller skates. He gazed at her, looking as if he needed to confirm he wasn't seeing things. Lunaria decided it was time to skip the small talk. She locked eyes with him dead serious and popped the question, "Wanna marry me?" It was so unexpected that it knocked the wind out of him. The guy coolly replied, "I'm not exactly rushing to put a ring on it." He also admitted he started the whole rumor just to keep his throne as the family head from slipping through his fingers. Upon hearing that, Lunaria figured he wasn't keen on handing over the reins to his brother anytime soon. She tenderly touched his hand as if trying to reel him back in. The guy stiffened up when she clasped his hands and brought them to her face. Gathering her courage, she finally spilled the beans about her nifty little talent foresight. Lunaria took his hands again and said all it took was a little touch for her to catch a glimpse of their future. The guy couldn't help but wonder if the family legends were true after all. Lunaria reiterated that she was proposing a marriage of convenience in exchange for a daily peek into the future. She casually added that he could call it quits whenever she became more of a hassle than a help. She spoke about it like it was just another day at the office. The vibe said she was remarkably composed for listing the terms of a deal that came with such heavy repercussions. He was taken aback by how badly she wanted to be a part of his family. Lunaria simply responded with a quiet smile and a calm nod. The guy let out a sigh and said she was the most intriguing candidate he had crossed paths with so far. His response lit up the desperate girl's face, but then he turned serious and told her she'd have to prove herself right here and now. Lunaria echoed his demand, promising she would do whatever he wished. Then she squeezed the warrior's hands tighter and took a deep breath. Time to jump into the timelines. She instantly felt a cacophony of events crashing down on her. Finally, she opened her eyes, feeling like a wet noodle. She crumpled into the Duke's arms, looking like someone just drained all her energy in one go. She jolted back to reality and explained how much it takes out of a person. She placed her hand on his chest and mentioned that the maid would soon deliver his tea, pointing at the rug. She warned she could just waltz in unannounced and take a spill. Lunaria added that his assistant would totally catch her, no big deal. She said if he fixed the rug, the future would take a different turn. No sooner had she finished her sentence than the maid barged into the room. She attempted to navigate the tray forward, but her foot got tangled in the rug. Before anyone could blink, she was flooring it. The tray went airborne. But thankfully, she was all right. Lunaria smirked, noting that everything unfolded just as she had foreseen. She confidently declared that this future was as solid as a rock. Now all that was left was to savor the Maris's reaction. It looked like everyone was completely shell-shocked. Finally, the guy smirked and said he got the picture now. He had no clue how any of this worked, but he swore he believed her. He told the maid to swing by later, insisting he didn't need any tea right now. Once they were alone, he proclaimed that her gift was worth its weight in gold. The Marquis suddenly remembered she had siblings. Plus, he was on to the fact that Lunaria was already engaged. He caught her off guard by asking if this little nugget of info was true. Urian swiftly recalled the promise made by the Hassel family to tie the knot with the Alawudi family's son. Lunaria froze like a deer caught in headlights when he brought up the real reason behind the arrangement. Eventually, she admitted it was true, but she'd already started the divorce process. The Maris was deep in thought, trying to decode her sudden changes. Lunaria reached out her hand, pleading for his help with her decision. She firmly declared she simply didn't want to be Randell's partner. The guys looked like they'd just seen a ghost at her unexpected confession. The Maris even chuckled at her straightforward reasoning. He asked if she came to him for just this. Lunaria went still when he mentioned her strong aversion to Count Alawudi's son. She shot him a smile, saying that was one way to describe it. She added that she might not get another shot at a joyful future. That's precisely why she sought out the notorious hermit Marquis Knox. The determination gleamed in her eyes as if she had the weight of the world resting on her shoulders. Finally, Knox said he would take her as his wife, out of respect. Lunaria jumped for joy, declaring it would be a privilege to be with him. She bowed deeply, expressing her gratitude for his trust. The Marquis said he'd move her to his estate in a few days. He took off after suggesting she stay in the castle for the night. The Maris could see how much she dreaded going back to her family. Just mentioning her kin made her face cloud over with gloom. Before departing, he instructed Urine to prepare the best room for the lady. The guy protested, realizing they were once again shoving all the responsibility onto him. He turned to Lunaria, flashed a grin, and affectionately called her sweetheart. On the way to her room, she was breaking down everything that had just unfolded. She chose to keep the details of what she traded for her gift a secret. She figured the Mary wasn't nearly as horrid as the rumors claimed. Still, she had to return to her place the next day. Since she was little, all she ever wanted was for someone to notice her. She blinked awake, barely recalling that she'd already made it home. The image of her father's face, twisted with fury, flashed in her mind. He had locked her in the cellar for leaving the house without permission. Lunaria realized their family connections were a sham. When she first discovered her powers, twisted with fury, he shoved her into the cellar for daring to step outside without a hall pass. Lunaria was well aware their family bonds were as fake as a $3 bill. When she realized she had powers of her own, she was over the moon, thinking this time everyone would finally dig her vibe. Back then, she was blissfully unaware of the chaos that awaited her and breezed through her energy like it was a candy store. She found herself wondering if Marquis Iltern would really swoop in for her like he promised. The girl recalled how he urged her not to lose hope before they went their separate ways. She felt a twinge of guilt when he mentioned he could read her like an open book. He gazed straight into her soul and confidently declared she was his wifey now. He told her to hang tight until he could finally meet her folks. The girl was flustered by his boldness, but nodded along again. Trusting him was her only option, so she waited for those mares like it was a bus. That night, his dreamy eyes pierced right through her with an intensity that could melt steel. To her surprise, she felt a surge of happiness just seeing those eyes, even at the very end. One fateful evening, the chief gave a rallying cry to gather everyone for a major announcement. It had been a solid 5 days since he tossed Luna into the house arrest corner. She barely nibbled at the food the maids brought by. The guy calmly stated he wasn't letting her off the hook until she said she was sorry. The younger sister was scratching her head, wondering where Luna had spent the night. Rosalind guessed that Luna had skipped town and checked into a hotel. She also mentioned a humongous deal was brewing soon with some new partners. Cynthia jumped in, saying she could use a reading herself before the ball. Sol couldn't sit still and jumped up to rush to Luna. He was about to dash out of the room, but crashed right into a stunned Randell. Just like everyone else, he had come to see Luna. The head honcho was instantly thrilled to spot his beloved fiancée. He threw his hands out wide and pleaded for forgiveness for his silly little daughter. Rondell fessed up that he started losing it when he got her letter breaking off their engagement. He wanted to check on her well-being and figure out why she was acting all wonky. He figured maybe he should apologize for not giving her enough lovey-dovey attention. Nicholas perked right up, thinking that might be the golden ticket. He chimed in, suggesting they all sit down together for a good old chat with his daughter. They froze like deer in headlights when they heard the servants yelling in shock. The servants were trying to stop some strangers, saying they couldn't just waltz in like this. The Maurice was like, "Why are you even bothering me with this?" He asked, all serious, "Doesn't anyone here know who I am?" The guy was lugging this gigantic bouquet of roses while Urine was scratching her head, wondering who he was. Everyone was completely blown away when they figured out it was the war hero. As the rest of the crowd was still processing the shock, Nicholas decided to start hollering. He demanded to know how this dude dared crash the mansion with such attitude. The guy told Nicholas to hit the road like right this minute. He kept yapping until he finally realized who he was jawing at. Nicholas had no clue who this guy was. It was the coat of arms that gave him the epiphany. He went ghostly pale and asked if he was truly the Marquis. The rest of the family held their breath, waiting to see how this reality show would unfold. The Marquis apologized for crashing their party without a heads up. He introduced himself as Knox Ilter, the Mooner Maurice. Then he dropped the jaw-dropping news that he was there to ask for Lady Lunathia's hand in matrimony. Nicholas flipped his lid when he heard that announcement. He tried to question what kind of nonsense he was spewing, but the Marquis just held out his hand. Iltern clutched his chest and confessed he had fallen head over heels for his daughter. Rondell immediately erupted, saying there was absolutely no way that was happening. He claimed Luna was promised to him and would never be his. Knox casually replied that he had already contacted his dad and he was on board to break off the engagement. That shocking news left Rondell speechless. His assistant jumped in, saying they had already taken care of the legal mumbo-jumbo. The letter from Count Alau stated he wouldn't block their love. Rondell couldn't wrap his head around the fact that his father caved to Marquis Knox. Turns out a war hero had the authority to step into the affairs of imperial knights. The Marquis laid out his status and mentioned Lady Hassel's words. He quoted her saying she never wanted to be Rondell's partner. Rondell immediately protested, saying that was a load of baloney and she would have never gone along with that. The Marquis replied that he would deal with the paperwork later. He turned to a maid and asked her to show him to Lady Hassel. He started to fume when he found out she was hanging out in the pantry. He questioned why they were treating someone one-eyed like that. Her folks immediately protested, claiming she was perfectly fine. Rondell backed them up, saying they would have known right away if that were the case. The Marquis realized none of the girl's family cared about her well-being. He demanded again that they take him to wherever they were hiding her. After that, he promptly followed the maid. Everyone else suspiciously eyed the peculiar Marquis. Looks like Cynthia was the only one eyeing him with joy and want. Her heart did a little flutter at his handsome face and impressive swagger. She crossed her arms, suddenly realizing he'd be the perfect catch as her fiancé. Meanwhile, Luna was stuck in boredom, packing her stuff while she waited for the mares. She methodically sifted through her old dresses and everything shoved in the storage room. She didn't want to take much with her and ended up snagging just a couple of dresses. She also managed to pocket the memoirs that somehow survived the chaos. That was about all she could grab before they shut the door on her. Now she carefully studied a piece of her past. She gently brushed her hand over the dress like she was searching for lost memories. In her palm was the brooch Rondell had gifted her last birthday. Now she realized he probably just told some servant to grab any old trinket. Everyone had forgotten her birthday that day. In her hand was the brooch Rondell gave her last birthday. Now she realized he probably just told some servant to buy a random thing. Everyone had forgotten her birthday that day. She was too busy showering S.A. with praise, even though they were twins. That sad truth hit her like a ton of bricks. She didn't want to take it with her. So she chucked the brooch like it was a frisbee and started packing her stuff instead. She hit pause when a weird noise floated in from nowhere. A wave of panic washed over her when the door flung open. Lunathia couldn't believe her eyes. The Marquis actually showed up for her. Her eyes popped open like saucers, and a warm glow of happiness sparked in her heart. The mares were doling out flowers, claiming he came to whisk away his beloved bride. It was just a tradition, he said, before suggesting they skedaddle. Without missing a beat, she grabbed her bag and hustled after him. She nearly fainted when he casually swiped her bag from her. Luna thanked him for being a gentleman, but he just stood there like a deer in headlights. Suddenly, they heard Nicholas bellowing Luna's name. He was with Rondell, and there was no way he was letting her slip. They descended upon her like a flock of hungry seagulls, not wanting their prized catch to escape. All these so-called friends were piling on the pressure, demanding answers. Rondell started shaking her like a maraca, but she shoved his hand away like it was a hot potato. Finally, she found her voice and told him to zip it. Rondell stood there, mouth agape, unable to believe. After a beat, Luna proclaimed she was off to marry Ilter. She added that from now on, she wasn't going to use her powers just to cater to their whims. She told them to stop messing with her life. The Marquis declared that moving forward, they'd only be allowed to see her if he gave the thumbs up. He put the kibosh on them, asking her to peek into their future like they had been doing. Nicholas was flabbergasted that she'd spilled the beans to the mares. Luna shrugged, saying they'd be family soon, so what was the big deal? Rondell launched into a tirade berating the mares for only giving a hoot about her magical powers. He yelled at Luna to snap out of it and realize who she was getting cozy with. Luna shot back disgusted, saying they were the ones that she had nothing left to say to them. Knox chimed in, asking if she was really sure she didn't want to bid farewell to her family. She spun around and said that until that very moment, they hadn't even acknowledged she was blind. With a snarky farewell to those she once called family, they made their way to the Ilton residence. Just as Knox ordered the fanciest room, the girl was over the moon about the gorgeous, spacious room. They even thoughtfully left a vase of water for her flowers. Urine chimed in that her personal maids would be swinging by later. He smiled and suggested she catch some Z's before dinner. The girl shot back a reminder that she was meant to predict their future once a day. Knox smirked and said he remembered their little deal. He casually mentioned that while her gift was handy, she didn't have to bust it out every single day. The girl was in disbelief that he'd turned down such a golden opportunity. He waved his hand like it was no biggie, saying he'd hit her up himself if he needed anything. The man zoomed out of her room with his assistant in tow. Suddenly, she was all by herself again. She started her mental hamster wheel, trying to figure out why he suddenly turned down utilizing her gift. Unlike her old man, it seemed he didn't think she needed to grind away day in and day out. From then on, she wouldn't have to bow to the selfish demands of her family. All this was thanks to the only person who'd ever shown her a bit of kindness. She grinned, recalling how his gentle demeanor clashed. Lunathia was just pleased she could at least hear him. Meanwhile, Urine caught on to his sweet side toward her and began teasing him, saying his ice-cold heart was finally melting. The guy reminded him that back in the day before he retired, he never turned down female attention. During the war, even the ladies of the night had some legendary nicknames for him. Real steamy ones. Urine confessed he nearly died laughing when he heard the stories from the other guys. Knox shot him a playful threat to watch it, then admitted that the past is like a stubborn stain. It never really goes away. They were always knee-deep in blood from their enemies, watching their brothers drop like flies. The guy went stiff as a... That day he couldn't miss how her hands were shaking, terrified of her family. You could see it in the way she clutched that bouquet, fending off their accusations like a pro. For the first time, he felt this overwhelming urge to become her knight in shining armor. Just then, a knight came charging up, yelling about a situation. Knox was spotted returning solo, like he'd just been ambushed. Meanwhile, Luna was busy getting to know her new maid. The girl bowed with a chipper smile, totally catching Luna off guard. Her previous servants treated her family like tea served in a crumpet, but she had never experienced this level of pampering. Rosalind chimed in that all this was for her safety. But now, here stood her person. Lunathia beamed at the young girl's enthusiasm. She returned the warm smile and expressed her happiness to meet her. After some chit-chat, Sierra asked if it was true that she couldn't see out of her right eye. The girl jumped in, asking if the mares had spilled the beans about her eye. She guessed with a bright smile that must be exactly why she was picked for maid duty. She meant so Knox must have ensured she was fit for the job even before she knew it. 3 years back, chaos broke out in their lands, and it dragged on for about 6 months. Amid all the death, the guy rushed out of her room with his sidekick trailing behind. The girl was left in the lurch again. She was blown away that they just handed her a fancy room like it was candy. She started brainstorming, trying to figure out why he suddenly turned down the gift. Unlike her old man, this guy didn't think she needed to slave away fulfilling family obligations every single day. From here on out, she wouldn't have to put up with her family's whiny demands, all thanks to the one person who had shown her some kindness. She grinned, picturing how his gentle side clashed with his tough guy persona. Lunathia was just thrilled that she could at least hear him. Meanwhile, Urine had also picked up on his soft spot for the girl. He started poking fun at him, saying his frosty heart was finally starting to thaw. The guy reminded him that before his retirement, he never turned down female attention. Even back in the war, the ladies of the night had some real juicy nicknames for him, ones that would leave anyone in stitches. Urine nearly fell over laughing when he first heard it from the guys. Knox threatened to make him pay for that joke, then admitted that past memories can be tough to shake off. They were always covered in their enemy's blood. Watching their pals drop one by one, the dude froze when Urine mentioned he was going to start a family soon. He figured he couldn't just toss Miss Hassel to the wolves. That day, he noticed her hands shaking like a leaf, terrified of her family. He could see it in the way she clutched that bouquet, defending herself against their nasty remarks. It was the first time he felt such a powerful urge to be her knight in shining armor. At that moment, a knight dashed up to him, yelling about a mess. Knox had been spotted coming back solo after checking out the forest. The guy looked like he'd wrestled a bear and lost all bruised up. Meanwhile, Luna was just starting to kick it with her new maid. The girl bowed with a cheerful grin, catching Luna off guard. Her old servants took care of the family like clockwork, but this level of pampering was a whole new ballgame. Rosalind said it was all about keeping her safe, but standing right in front of her was her own maid, eager to do anything. Lunathia couldn't help but be delighted by the young girl's enthusiasm. She said she was glad to meet her and shot back a warm smile. After a bit, Sierra asked if it was true that she was blind in her right eye. The girl immediately wondered if the maids had spilled the beans about that. She guessed with a grin that it was exactly why she got picked as a maid. She mentioned her sweetheart was one of Knox's crew and had lost an eye too. Looks like Knox made sure she was qualified for the job from the get-go. 3 years ago, war had crashed into their lands and it stuck around for about 6 months. Amidst all the chaos, there was this one dude who stood his ground no matter what. Sierra figured Knox was just being her knight in shining armor, making things smoother. Lunathia, without realizing it, started blushing a little. Knox's sweetness really struck a chord with her. Everyone and their grandmother said he was a brute, but it turned out he had a heart of gold. Sierra kept gushing about what a fantastic guy he was. She even talked about her boyfriend, who was still serving despite his injury. Lunaria couldn't wrap her head around why he needed soldiers, but she quickly got distracted by an offer for some tea. Sierra was all bouncy, super excited to whip up some new brew. Luna was blown away by how genuinely sweet Sierra was. At first, she seemed a bit hyper, but that vibe was starting to grow on Luna. Once she had some alone time, she decided it was memoir writing hour. She made sure to jot down new bits about how she was holding up. The girl calmly penned her thoughts, not knowing how soon she might lose her other senses. That's precisely why she wanted to document everything she wanted to achieve this year. She was thrilled about making some fantastic new friends. After some time, she wrapped up her entries. She swiveled the diary around a bit before calling it quits for the day. Luna had recorded all the shenanigans she endured back at her family's place. Now she had a real chance at making fresh memories. But all of a sudden, she noticed Sierra still hadn't returned. She flung the door open and found Sierra in tears. Luna rushed over, eager to find out what was wrong. Turns out her boyfriend Robert had gone missing in action. Just moments ago, she was singing his praises, and now she was a waterfall of tears. Apparently, his squad was out in the thick woods near the castle and had tangled with a horde of blood-sucking bats. Lunaria was furious that such terrifying creatures were hanging out so close by. She recalled only seeing monsters like that in fairy tales. The girl thought they ought to send out a rescue crew. Just then, Knox popped up behind her, announcing he was off to search. Luna felt a flicker of worry. Realizing he was going solo, she insisted he needed to find Robert before nightfall. Lunaria turned her focus back to Sierra's heart-wrenching sobs. She remembered how Sierra lit up talking about her sweetheart. That joy had swiftly morphed into a feeling of despair and defeat. Luna crossed her arms, bracing herself for what was ahead. Knox was itching to act. He stated he was heading east. Urin wanted to stick around for Sierra's sake, but she thanked him and said no way. Urin suggested they chill together, but she wasn't having any of it. She downright said it was time to cash in on their deal. Even Mr. Knox himself was taken aback when he heard her sharp retort. He still had his doubts about how her powers worked. He turned around and asked if she was capable of locating Robert. The girl instructed him to hold out his hand. She was up for giving it a go. She focused hard and squeezed her eyes shut. A whirlwind of nightmarish scenarios invaded her mind, like Robert getting ripped apart by wild animals. She pictured Sierra's gut-wrenching wails and then the dude's funeral. Luna's eyes flew open and she jumped back like she'd been zapped. Knox noticed her shock and realized it was time to dig deeper. He asked her what she saw. She stumbled over her words, barely managing to say that, in her vision, they didn't make it in time. The guy froze, unable to believe what he'd just heard. She mentioned a bear with a crescent-shaped scar on its forehead. Supposedly it was going to attack Robert in a cave that doubled as a bear's den. Knox quickly clarified that the team was exploring a different section of the woods instead. Yuri clung to Knox's words, his mind racing with possibilities. The girl urged him to trust her and follow her into the cave to find Robert. Knox shot back about how he could end up 6 feet under if she was wrong. Luna locked eyes with him when he told her he had faith in her. He dispatched a battalion of soldiers to head east to where Robert was. Meanwhile, he was set on diving right into that bear's den she mentioned. Lunathia immediately protested, saying it was way too risky to go solo. In response, he gently stroked her cheek and told her not to fret. He confidently guaranteed that thanks to her powers, they'd both return safe and sound. His soothing words somehow calmed the concerned girl. After that, Knox backed up and ordered Urine to roll out. Urine followed suit, grinning, while saying he didn't need to play the tough guy. Lunathia crossed her arms, pleading for them to return in one piece. She had no idea how their mission would unfold, but she was keeping her fingers crossed. The girl was so lost in thought that she didn't realize how long she'd been sitting there until evening. She vaguely recollected dozing off while waiting for the others. Then the girl shot awake, realizing it was already nighttime. The next thing she knew, she bumped into Urine, who greeted her with a big old grin. Lunathia immediately bombarded him with questions about the whereabouts of the fellows. He just beamed at her and suggested she take a gander at them. She found the two lovebirds finally back together after all that chaos. Luna was over the moon, so thrilled that everything turned out okay for them. It turned out that during the bat fiasco, Robert lost his footing and took a tumble off a cliff. He decided to ride out the night in a cave, which just happened to be a bear's den. Urine chimed in that they managed to rescue Robert, all thanks to her. They both fell silent when they heard Master Knox's voice. He spotted the girl grinning and declared that no bear stood a chance against him. The man bowed his head genuinely, thanking her for her help. The woman told him to lift his head because she was just doing her part. He replied that she chose to assist them out of her own free will. Thanks to her, they pulled off saving Robert. They both went quiet when they heard Master Knox's voice. He saw the girl beaming and added that a bear wouldn't stand a chance against him. The man bowed his head and genuinely thanked her for her help. The woman told him to lift his head up and said she was just doing her part. He shot back that she chose to help them all on her own. Knox kept thanking her like he was auditioning for a gratitude award, and honestly, it was throwing her for a loop. Remember when her gift was just treated like a chore? Yeah, those days were long gone. Urine decided to chime in, saying they gave a little shout-out to her help in front of the couple, and it was like they hit the turbo button on their thank you mode. Lunathia felt like she was right in the epicenter of an embarrassment tsunami. That's when she remembered she had a burning question for Knox. She asked him what treasure he was hunting for in the place called Moonon Glade. As soon as she said it, her world flipped upside down. Why was everything suddenly shaded in gloom? The girl gave him a proper scare when she just conked out. Guess taking a siesta from her powers finally caught up to her. She was off in dreamland, back to being a tiny tot again. There she was wailing in the corner of a barren room, like someone forgot her birthday. Then poof, an old woman who could have been her twin appeared. She started rubbing the little girl's back like a pro. Finally, the little girl managed to hiccup out that her dad totally laid into her. She was trying to play peacemaker between Rosalind and Sol, who were arguing over nothing but ended up getting shoved away like a rag doll. In her tumble, she accidentally knocked into Cynthia, who then turned on the waterworks. The woman insisted she wasn't to blame and was ready to give her dad a piece of her mind. The little girl turned to her grandma and asked why her dad always looked like he swallowed a lemon. She figured it was because she didn't look like everyone else. The girl thought everyone would adore her if she just morphed into her grandma. The woman squeezed her tight, declaring she didn't want this gift anymore. She admitted it felt like a hefty stone around her neck and promised to find people who loved her just as she was. She wrapped up with "I love you" to bits, even without this gift. Grandma was the only one who loved Luna like a chocolate chip cookie loves milk. After she left this mortal coil, her gift popped over to Luna, who conveniently forgot her grandma's sage advice. Only later did the light bulb go off, realizing Grandma was spot on. After a bit, she finally pried her eyes open. Sierra was right there, looking like she'd just seen a ghost. Luna's eyes popped wide open. She had no clue how long she'd been zonked. The maid filled her in that she'd been out for a full 3 hours. She also mentioned that Lunathia had plopped right into Lord Knox's arms. Right then, he was off like a shot to get her resting in the lounge. The maid added with a smile that he carried her like a fairy tale princess. Hearing that made Luna's cheeks match a tomato. Sierra then decided it was time to play the gratitude card. She bowed like she was in a samurai movie, feeling words just wouldn't cut it for her thankfulness. Luna tried to wave it off like it was no biggie, but the eager maid jumped in, promising they'd bend over backward to repay her kindness. She mentioned that Master Knox was already waiting for her for dinner, waving her over like a magician. Lunathia, still lost in her thoughts, quickly followed her lead and parked herself at the table. After a while, she made her way over to Knox, who looked like he'd just discovered a new galaxy with the deep frown on his face. She tried explaining that she was just wiped out from the day and crashed like a computer. Lunathia apologized for making him wait, and he casually waved it off, saying, "No biggie, take a seat." Just as she plopped down across from him, trays of food showed up like they were on a food delivery service. The girl was astonished by what appeared right in front of her. She raced to take a bite like it was the last meal on Earth. Her stomach was doing somersaults. Even she was shocked by how yummy it was. Knox casually remarked that she sure had a hearty appetite. The girl was intent on savoring each morsel before it pulled a disappearing act. Even the head honcho noticed how much she was digging into the food. Suddenly, she remembered her buddy, who would eat anything thrown his way. Sadly, he was struck down by poisoned arrows during the war. Before he passed, all he wanted. Lunathia got what he meant and couldn't help but ask if that plea had been heard. Knox nodded, saying he'd fight hard for any life still worth saving. That's when a little light bulb went off in his head about her comment on being disposed of if she was too burdensome. The fella probed if she still felt that way after hearing his story. Miss Hassel took a tiny pause, then said she was still on that train. With a smile, she added that she was aware of what was happening and wasn't the least bit spooked. She totally caught him off guard, announcing he turned out to be a decent guy. He sheepishly admitted he might have overstepped some boundaries. Lunathia didn't catch that and asked him to spill it again. The guy was blushing like a schoolboy and told her to just ignore it. Then he surprised her by saying he owed her an apology. He recalled that night he carried Luna back to her room. Turns out he had spotted an open book on her desk and couldn't resist sneaking a peek. She immediately turned crimson, trying to figure out what he might have seen. He apologized, claiming he'd only glimpsed the page that was open. Knox then commented that it was adorable that she kept a personal journal. Looking at her, he couldn't help but liken her to a little puppy. He remembered her writing about dreaming of seeing the scenery, so he decided to whisk her away somewhere special. He smirked full of confidence, promising to show her a view that would blow her socks off. After a while, he led her to a clearing in the woods. She was about to say they wouldn't see a thing in the dark, but he interrupted. "You can't see the stars or moon in this forest, but there's something I want to show you that'll light up your world." The very next moment, she spotted a glowing sight that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Lunaria gasped in wonder as she realized the entire forest was shimmering with those little lights. She was completely overwhelmed by the beauty. He didn't catch what she said and asked her to repeat it. The guy got all flustered and told her to just forget it. She was taken aback when he confessed he owed her an apology. He recalled that night, lugging Luna back to her bedroom. Turns out he had spotted an open book on her desk and took a quick peek. She immediately got flustered, trying to figure out what he'd managed to read. He apologized, saying he'd only seen the page that was open. Knox also mentioned it was adorable that she kept a personal journal. He looked at her and couldn't help but picture her as a little puppy. The guy remembered her jotting down about wanting to see the sights, so he decided to take her somewhere cool. He smirked all full of himself and promised to show her an amazing view. After a bit, he led her to a clearing in the woods. She started to say they wouldn't be able to see anything in the dark like this. He said, "You won't see the stars or moon in this dense jungle, but there's something cool I want to show you." In the next breath, the girl noticed a bright glow all around. Lunaria gasped in awe as she realized the whole forest was lit up with them. She was completely blown away by the beauty, something she never even knew existed. The man said they were called moonfire glowbugs and only came out after dark. He gently touched the girl's back and asked what she thought. It looked like he nailed the surprise. Lunaria was over the moon. Her smile sparkled so bright it couldn't help but spread good vibes to the glowbugs too. These glowbugs were tightly linked to the moonlit glade she had been curious about. It was famous because the grass there had some magical properties. Legends proclaimed that this herb could perform miracles and that magical stones were hiding in the woods. Luna's memory jogged to a similar legend she had read before. The moment came when Knox decided to spill the beans on his real mission. He admitted he was hunting for this field as a favor for the imperial heir. Luna felt an electric shock, realizing he meant the future emperor. In a split second, she grasped that Knox had been tasked with an important mission. He added that this stone could be gifted to the Empress as a token of goodwill. Knox also clarified that his buddy had personally asked him to handle this. Over time, they had stumbled upon a couple of stone tablets with ancient symbols. They hoped to find the spot after cracking the codes, but ended up with nothing. Luna couldn't help but wonder if she could lend a hand for his mission to succeed. The guy noticed the weather taking a turn and suggested they head back to the castle. The moment she called him master, he turned to stone. He had a sudden urge to ask her to call him something completely different. Knox looked her straight in the eye and casually reminded her that she'd be his wife soon enough. Guess Luna had an epiphany about how odd that formal title sounded. When she flipped the script and proposed calling him Master Knox, he gave her a long, scrutinizing look and said he'd just stick to calling her by her name too. Out of nowhere, Luna realized she was feeling all warm and fuzzy around him. Like a true gentleman, he offered her his arm and asked if he could be her personal escort, claiming it was because she was blind and would need a little help. The girl jumped at the chance and extended her hand to him. Time was relentless, and before they knew it, an entire month had zipped by since that fateful day. Lunatia's dad was hit with one hardship after another, like a game of whack-a-mole. He got swindled by the merchant he bought the orchard from. Just one little loophole in the contract cost them the whole property. He couldn't help but think that none of this would have happened if Lunatia had been around. Her mother lamented how she had been holding out hope that Lunatia would make a grand return. Leia's grades had also tanked since she left, and even little Cynthia stopped making appearances at social happenings. Unlike the rest, Rosalind was killing it all by herself, making big moves in the business world. Nicholas lost his cool yelling about how they were cutting ties with the Alloy family for good. He kept on ranting and raving, pointing fingers at Luna, the one who bailed, blaming her for all their issues. Meanwhile, Rosalind was eavesdropping quietly, hiding behind the door like a ninja. She was on the verge of bailing, but then her assistant showed up with the monthly sales figures. He seemed to be prepping her for some bad news, giving her a respectful bow. The results were so dismal her face just dropped. She balled up the paper in her fist, fuming, and realized it was time to stir things up. Turns out, she had been painting a rosy picture of how the business was thriving, while their main income source was lounging in a castle, carefree as a bird. It had been an entire month since she finally broke free. On one of those days, the girl dashed over to talk to Knox. Lunathia bolted toward him and called out the agreed-upon signal. She offered to read his future before their expedition, but to her surprise, Knox turned it down, saying they were sticking to a safe route. He reminded her that thanks to her, they had managed to evade that nasty wolf. Still, Luna remembered their deal. But before she could finish her thought, he gently caressed her cheek, looking her right in the eyes, serious as ever, and again said he wasn't going to hold to it. Besides, he reminded her that she had snoozed for 3 days straight after using her powers. Lunathia knew he had a point, but she still felt the urge to argue. His assistant piped up, saying his sweet little wife just wanted to lend a hand. He added with a smile that Knox's darling wife had even baked them cookies. One of the soldiers chimed in that Robert was feeling envious because of how close she'd gotten with Sierra. Knox observed thoughtfully as his crew praised Lunathia. He couldn't shake the memories of the wishes she had jotted down in her diary. Luna shyly confessed she had always wanted to whip up cookies for others. Knox calmly pointed out how all his subordinates were crazy about her, adding that he was quite fond of her cookies himself. Luna lit up and genuinely thanked him for the kind words. Meanwhile, all the subordinates were blissfully watching their boss. The moment he glanced in their direction, they immediately pretended to be deep in conversation about totally unrelated stuff. Urin turned to the girl and said they were just going to scout the area for useful resources. Those orders came straight from the Crown Prince himself. Lunatia quickly guessed he was tight with Knox. Right after that, Marcus mounted his horse and announced it was time to hit the road. The girl promptly put a hand to her chest, saying she'd be waiting for them. Lunatia called after him, urging him to be careful out there. While he was gone, the girl kept herself busy with all sorts of tasks. She was thankful for all the incredible people surrounding her. Sierra grinned and said they finally got the furnace up and running. Lunathia decided to bake some cookies and asked for a baking sheet. Deep down, she realized she really wanted to help all these folks. She tried to glimpse what Knox's future might look like in a year, but it was all kinds of foggy. After that, she knocked out for 3 days straight. Even though she didn't get the results she wanted, her right eye turned into a total black hole, and she lost sight of the future like a bad fortune cookie. She was totally in the dark about when Knox would catch on to her sensory malfunction. Fortunately, Luna still had a handle on the immediate future. She whipped around to find Sierra stuck like a deer in headlights over a bowl of berries. Robert dragged those back from the expedition. But surprise, surprise, they were sour enough to make a lemon jealous. Lunathia couldn't help but grin at the hilarious face Sierra was making. Sierra tried to talk her out of trying one, but curiosity had her feeling bold. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Jindal was deep in thought over a letter that showed up uninvited. He heard a messenger bird swoop in through his window like he was in some kind of a cartoon. The prince chuckled, betting it was a note from the Moon Eater himself. He was on cloud nine, even if he had a sneaky suspicion that Urin was the one writing all the love letters. It said the search was going smoothly and a report was coming soon. Then, bam, he was knocked off his socks, learning he was about to get hitched. Urin also tossed in that the ice-hearted Knox was totally pleased with her. The prince couldn't believe his luck. Great news from his buddy. Knox had never let a woman get anywhere near him before. The atmosphere was practically screaming at him to meet this amazing lady in the flesh. Meanwhile, Knox's report mentioned that Luna was feeling less than peppy. Sierra was fretting, noticing some major changes in her friend. She claimed Luna was acting all sorts of strange ever since they baked that cake. She even quit drinking her beloved tea and munching on sweets. Urin chipped in, noting that the staff hadn't seen any treats from her either. He could tell from the sullen looks on all his soldiers. Knox was deep in thought and realized she'd barely touched her dinner lately. All the signs pointed to one thing. The girl had lost her appetite. Sierra was scratching her head, figuring Luna must just be a bit under the weather. Knox had a light bulb moment, thinking it'd been way too long since he spent some quality time with her. He decided to chuck the paperwork and get to the bottom of this himself. The guy sprang to his feet and proclaimed he wanted to see her face to face. He ended with a grand statement about being there for his wife during tough times. Urin instantly decided the infamous Night-Night was dusting off his armor. The guy told him to pipe down, claiming he was just young and foolish back then. Looks like his threat made Urin reconsider, and he zipped it. He leaned over to Sierra and whispered that back in the day, Knox was quite the charmer. The assistant smiled, glad to see Knox grinning like a Cheshire cat. Her ear wasn't exactly burning. In fact, his words were making her think. He remembered how excited Luna got over those fireflies. He figured he could put a smile back on her face, if only he could figure out what she needed. Sierra beamed and suggested a change of scenery with him. She was hinting they should hit the city and snag some quality time together. Just then, a maid burst in, announcing the arrival of an important guest. Before she could even finish her sentence, the crown prince magically appeared right behind her. Knox squinted, feeling like his head was about to explode, and asked why he chose today, of all days, to drop by. The prince said he missed him after getting the latest scoop. Urin quickly jumped in to explain why he sent a letter to the prince. Knox tried to argue it wasn't his idea, but Urin had a different take. The prince winked and practically laid it all out for them. He was there to meet the lovely young lady. The Marquis wasted no time spilling the beans to Luna, and her jaw nearly hit the floor. He mentioned that the crown prince was pacing in the drawing room just waiting for her. Prince Gandalf von Lassenras was an only child who was pretty much a one-man show, independent, smart, and social. Lunathia couldn't believe a guy like him wanted to see her. Knox joked he could boot the prince out if she wasn't interested. She needed just a smidgen of time to get ready. She added that she didn't want to embarrass him or come off rude. Knox was ready to argue, but then thought better of it. He opened his mouth to say something, but suddenly turned mute as a fish. He opted to bail and told her to holler if she got tired of the prince. Knox joked he'd just toss him out to the wolves. That little jab brought a smile to her face, which she couldn't help but sport. Eventually, she mustered the courage to meet the prince. She curtsied and greeted him, dazzling him with her beauty. To her surprise, the young man offered his hand and told her to skip the formalities. He grinned warmly, expressing he wasn't a fan of that stuff anyway. Then he invited her to sit beside him so they could chat. Lunathia scrambled to settle down, realizing the rumors about him were spot on. And the prince casually asked how she managed to snag someone like Knox. They both knew full well Knox wouldn't tie the knot with just anyone, but Luna couldn't spill all the details of their arrangement. Before their rendezvous, the prince had done his homework on the Hassel family tree. From some ancient scrolls, he discovered her family had a so-called gift for foresight. The crown prince recounted the legend of her family's gift with all the flair of a storyteller. Luna felt a wave of panic, realizing their secret might as well be up on a billboard. Finally, she boldly declared it was just a tall tale spun by their ancestors. Legends didn't seem to faze the prince, especially since he was on the lookout for the moonlight clearing. He decided to humor her, saying he wasn't. Shocked she was tying the knot. Her family had been keeping their gift under wraps from the royals to avoid throwing a wrench into the empire's destiny. Then out of nowhere, the prince suggested she ditch Knox and marry him instead. Luna was so shocked by that jaw-dropper she turned into a human popsicle. Urine totally lost it, screaming that he couldn't let that happen. The prince just gave a cheeky grin, asking if Urine was eavesdropping like a nosy neighbor. Urine accused the prince of trying to swipe his master Knox's happiness. Little did he realize the mark was actually himself, and he was catching every word. He totally blew his cover when they asked him to back them up. Luna was practically buzzing with excitement, wondering how Knox would handle all this drama. The guy stepped up and boldly proclaimed he had picked Lunathia to be his future wifey. That's precisely why he thought bolting now would be a major blunder. The girl shot back quick, claiming she hadn't even thought about that kind of nonsense. Everyone always just saw her powers before, but with him, she finally felt genuine joy. The prince found what he'd been searching for and confessed he wasn't convinced by Urine's letter at first. He asserted that his old pal was for the first time ever completely head over heels for a woman. Knox told him to zip it, reminding him he already had a chosen one in the running. His old man had even given this gal the thumbs up as the future empress. Nevertheless, Jindal viewed it as simply a political alliance and wanted to keep his options open, if you catch my drift. That cheeky remark let Lunathia know exactly what kind of quirky humor the prince had. If it weren't for all this chaos, she'd think they were onto her and were planning to nab her for her powers. Finally, the dude raised his hand and announced he had a little something to drop on them. Knox was totally thrown when he spotted some kind of letter in the guy's hand. Turns out he tracked all this way just to hand over a letter from the emperor himself. In it, the emperor rambled on about how pumped he was for Knox's marriage. He even wanted them to tie the knot right then and there in the palace and offered to foot the bill. Before Knox could even think twice, he snatched the letter straight out of the guy's hand. He recalled he'd been given the green light to ignore the emperor's orders. Jindal just flashed that smirk again and said, "You don't just pass on something like that?" He added that if they didn't get hitched, the Hell family would keep acting like a bunch of total jerks. Luna jumped up like a jack-in-the-box, exclaiming what the heck they had to do with any of this. The prince yelled from a distance, mentioning they still hadn't gotten over her bailing. High society was still in shock that Knox got married, but those Vic Counts are really playing that angle for all it's worth. He's been yapping all over town that their household is under the protection of the ill family. Lunathia couldn't believe he had the gall to pull something like that. Knox was just as taken aback, but kept his cool and asked him to repeat that. He's been spreading rumors that he married off his daughter to squeeze some cash from her family. Looks like that Vic Count decided to grab this chance and shine the spotlight on their family. He thought the Marquis was so cut off from reality he wouldn't hear about these whispers. Luna felt a wave of shame that these people were still trying to claw their way to the top. She couldn't believe they were referring to her as their darling daughter in public. Knox noticed her downcast demeanor and promised he'd personally handle it. The girl felt low that she was causing Knox so much fuss. The prince added that the bride's family was obliged to show up to the wedding. They needed to prove that Luna had completely severed ties with her family. Urine was totally on board with that idea, declaring they deserved a lesson. Jindal said he was really looking forward to watching Knox and Lunathia's ex get into it. After he said that, Luna realized the prince had done his homework on her. He asked what choice they'd make in a way that made it sound like they were headed into some wild adventure. Knox and Lunathia exchanged a tense glance, weighing their choices. Finally, the dude suggested they should agree, but he was up for considering Luna's desires. Luna wasn't really itching to see her family, but she was still game for it. She declared all fired up that she was ready to face them head on. Her answer seemed to please Jendel, after which he said the ceremony would be a blast. He promised he'd work out all the details with her dad and let them know a specific date. He gently kissed her hand and asked her to keep an eye on his dopey friend. The prince straight up ticked Knox off, and Knox reminded him he was about to peace out. Jendel called him a grouch in return and waved goodbye before bouncing. Knox wearily touched his forehead like he'd just inherited another headache. Luna's mind started swirling with thoughts about the upcoming confrontation. Knox knew this decision was weighing heavily on her, and he totally respected that. Meanwhile, Cynthia was daydreaming about how much she treasured her family. She was buzzing with excitement that Mom and Dad always spoiled her rotten. Even her sister Rosalind and brother Soleil were always total sweethearts to her. She adored Luna even more since she always got her what she wanted. Right now, she was watching Dad's jaw hit the floor when he heard about his daughter marrying Iltern. Nicholas had been fuming ever since Luna took off. The girl missed her sister because life got way tougher without her special gift. On top of that, she really missed that amazing Morris. Nicholas knew their appearance would signal that Lunathia was done with the family. That meant they couldn't hide behind the Marquis's reputation anymore. The wife tried to give her husband a talking to, but he snapped at her to zip it. Nicholas thought he could schmooze some high-status aristocrats. Looks like Cynthia just got the scoop on her sister's upcoming engagement. She was determined to see him at the party and totally win him over. The kid was convinced he was marrying Lunalia for her powers, but little did he know she couldn't hide behind that Marquis name any longer. The wife attempted to give her husband a piece of her mind, but he snapped at her to keep it zipped. Nicholas thought he could charm some high-rolling aristocrats. Looks like Cynthia just found out about her sister's imminent engagement. She decided she would show up at the party and totally win him over. The kid was convinced he was marrying Lunalia for her super cool abilities. Fired up by her own genius, she stormed into her parents' study. She flashed a grin and pleaded to head off to her sister's engagement bash. Meanwhile, Marisol was just getting into the nitty-gritty of the preparations. Urin suggested they kick things off by hunting for a dress for the bride-to-be. He was dead set on making sure Luna sparkled on their big day. The assistant shot Knox a cheeky wink and proposed they hit the town for a little retail therapy. The girl froze like a deer in headlights when Knox declared he was all in for a shopping spree. He decided to keep pushing the point, saying he only wanted to stroll with her, just the two of them. Luna instantly recalled how much he loathed being in public. Knox shot back that he didn't give a hoot about that, and she shouldn't stress over it. Urin chuckled and said he really needed to brush up on his game when it came to asking a gal out. Knox swallowed his irritation and calmly rose to his feet. He sidled up to her and said he'd love to take a leisurely walk with her. He asked her so earnestly it made her blush like a tomato. He noticed she was flustered and asked again if she'd keep him company. Luna jumped on the opportunity, but then started fretting about what to wear. Eventually, they wandered into the city, and she was dazzled by its beauty. She had envisioned a bustling scene, but was taken aback by how calm it was. Knox mentioned that his brother was in charge of the city right now, so Luna accidentally stumbled upon the info that he had a brother. Lost in thought, she totally missed his hand reaching out. She was caught off guard when he offered his arm before they headed inside. Knox explained it was because her eyesight was kind of lacking, and she might get lost in the crowd. She knew he was just being thoughtful, but it still made her feel super awkward. She reached out and took his hand, feeling her heart doing the cha-cha in her chest, and that's how they walked hand in hand all the way to the store. A couple of minutes later, the shopkeeper called out to them, cooing about what a cute couple they made. The guy beamed and asked if they wanted to try some fresh apples. He started raving about how juicy and sweet they were this season. The shopkeeper handed an apple to Lunaria and urged her to give it a shot. She was so flustered she almost forgot she'd lost some of her taste buds. She quickly took a bite, not wanting to raise any red flags. Lunaria was at a loss, so she decided to fake it with a smile. The shopkeeper saw her grin and cautioned her not to let Mr. Knox catch on. Knox didn't even flinch at his words and yanked Lunathia by the arm. He dragged her away so fast the shopkeeper stood no chance. It was like the Marquis had teleported her into an alley in a fit of rage. The next thing she knew, he had her pinned against the wall. It scared the living daylights out of her. She had no clue why he was suddenly so riled up. Knox told her he couldn't stand being lied to, and he could smell a fib from a mile away. She tried to tell him she had no idea what he was on about, but he told her to save the excuses. He stared deep into her eyes and said he could see right through her. Knox brought up how phony her reaction had been. He explained that he had set it up with the shopkeeper and swapped her apple for a sour one. Luna was so flabbergasted she accidentally dropped her apple. She panicked at the thought of him discovering she was losing all 5 senses. Luna was worried he might send her back to her folks or put the kibosh on her powers. Neither of those options sounded appealing. They could take everything from her. No one had ever bothered to care about her this much. The guy sighed like he was worn out and mentioned he suspected she had some secrets. He pressed her to be straight with him. Why did she want him to look after her down the line? It looked like that question threw her for a loop, and she went all clam up. The Morris was bound and determined to get an answer, but his younger brother called him over. A grinning kid named Suk immediately caught his attention. He pulled down his hood and said he was just doing a little inspection. Lunathia was thrown for a loop because he looked absolutely nothing like Knox. The second he spotted her, she figured it was polite to introduce herself. She gave a little bow and said her name was Lunathia Hassel. She began to apologize for running into them in a spot like this, but he interrupted her. He bowed back and beamed, saying he was thrilled to meet her. Unlike Knox, this guy's gentle smile was a knockout. He reminded her of that squirrel she once caught in the Soul Forest. Suk was over the moon that his tough older brother had finally found himself a bride. He grinned and told her how much he'd been waiting to meet her. Luna barely had a chance to return the sentiment before Knox was already telling her to skedaddle, as if he didn't even want to chat. He bolted off, barking at Suk not to loiter in the alley. The kid hung his head and sighed. Knox hasn't been home at all lately. He brought up their Majesty's command concerning the plant on the moonlit field. Absolute nonsense. Luna agreed it seemed pointless to go through all this just to snag a gift for the Empress. She used to believe this whole quest was a personal wish from the Empress. Suk asked if there wasn't a deeper reason behind all this. Knox answered coolly that even if there was, it wasn't his issue. The young man protested, saying he wanted everything that was rightfully his back. He admitted sadly that he wasn't cut out to lead anyone. Knox was taken aback and said he'd been considering letting him take over the family head position. Suk started to correct him, but Knox interrupted, saying that was what their mother wanted. Before he could finish the sentence, his condition took a nosedive. Luna quickly draped her arm around him, clearly worried about his health. Knox coolly told him to catch a breath of fresh air. That's all the guy needed. They proceeded to carefully escort him to the busy main street. Luna froze like a deer in headlights when she spotted her older sister in the distance. At first, she was like, "What is that?" but then figured she was just seeing double. Suk gave a little cough, and she quickly told him to inhale deeply and slowly. Knox asked where his bodyguards were hiding, and what about that firecracker of a fiancé he had in the city. Just as Suk was about to spill the beans, an indignant girl's voice exploded through the air. The calm dude's fiancée crossed her arms like a pro and shot daggers at them. She started lighting into Lord Suk for leaving her high and dry. She shot a disdainful look at Lunathia, barking at her to remove her hands from her fiancé. Suk, not one to back down, declared that Ruby shouldn't talk to his brother's future wife like that. She hurried him off, saying he was in good hands. She promised to load him up with medicine once they reached the carriage. She made a face at Knox, wishing him endless days of wandering in search of moongrass. Side note, she claimed her and Suk's future kid would be the heir to the Iltern house. Looks like Knox was already well acquainted with the girl's wicked temper, so he just shrugged it off. Once they were alone, he explained that she was the one and only daughter of Maris Fond. Luna's brain started cranking, trying to connect the dots to that oh-so-familiar name. Finally, it clicked. She remembered his wife as a big shot in high society. Luna's mom had been desperately trying to charm her, but it was like throwing spaghetti at a wall. Nothing stuck. Knox decided it was time to move on, since daylight was fleeing. She squeezed his hand, realizing she'd actually managed to keep her big secret hidden. She quickly corrected herself. Since Knox was the guy who made this all possible, it felt wrong hiding something so huge from him. In that moment, she decided she'd spill all her secrets to him. Just not right now. Eventually, they wandered into a super fancy jewelry store. The sales dude flashed them a smile and dove right into his pitch. Knox cut to the chase and asked the guy to pick out a few jewelry sets. Luna tried to talk him out of buying all that stuff for her. Out of the blue, the dude dropped a bombshell. He just loved dressing her up. That knocked her for a loop. Her face turned redder than a tomato in summer. Just then, the consultant rolled in with some top-notch A-grade sparkle. Lunathia lit up, checking out each dazzling piece. Suddenly, her mind flashed back to that one time she spotted her older sister. Luna still couldn't tell if it was really her or a ghostly doppelganger. Meanwhile, back at Rosalind's shop, a storm was brewing. After hours of studying the competition like a hawk, she busted through the door, totally bummed out. Her sidekick freaked out and started backpedaling. Rosalind snapped at him to keep quiet, then said their shop was flooded with annoying customers. She shoved a report at him, demanding an explanation for the massive plummet in sales. The guy bowed so low he nearly kissed the floor, claiming he was just following her orders. He was so terrified he was shaking like a leaf. Rosalind was furious that she could no longer use Lunatia as her secret weapon. She turned on her heel and told the guy he was fired. He pleaded for her to change her mind, but she was lost in her own angry thoughts. She grimly opened her office door and saw an avalanche of paperwork awaiting her. She mindlessly grabbed the first piece of paper she could find off the table. Lo and behold, it had a drawing of that pesky phantom plant. She was dead set on finding those gem fruits. Sales would skyrocket. The girl smirked, declaring this herb was going to be hers, all hers. Meanwhile, Castle Eterna was alive with jubilant cheers. Sierra was over the moon with all the shopping they'd knocked out of the park. The maid was practically glowing at the sight of the stunning Lunathia. Every outfit was a showstopper. They were in a heated debate about which one to pick for the grand banquet. Sierra was so hyped up you'd think her life depended on this decision. The girl smiled and suggested they take a breather before the next fitting. Luna didn't even get a chance to protest before Sierra dashed off to brew some tea. Luna figured it was a good time to heel off her dress so she wouldn't accidentally ruin it. She froze right in the middle of the room, lost in thought, surrounded by all those opulent gifts. In the Hassel family, she was the only one who rarely got anything new. That's why Marquis' strict words hit her like a ton of bricks. Even if the line sounded cheesy, it managed to bring a smile to her face. As soon as she caught that telltale sound, she spun around. Figured it was Sierra, but she collided right into the Marquis himself. I think she was so shocked. She completely forgot what she was wearing. The girl instantly tried to shield herself from her future hubby's gaze. Knox was supposed to be used to ladies, but the poor guy still got flustered. He announced he'd turn his back, then asked if he should just bounce. Then he noticed a birthmark on her chest, shaped like a clock. After hearing the backstory, he thought about how rough she'd had it. She agreed, saying she started as just an add-on to her older brother at first. From that point on, she was treated like dirt, until she built up some strength. After that, they finally started to notice her, which she had to admit felt good. She gave a bittersweet smile, adding that they only saw her as a handy tool. Knox pondered her words, noting the comparison was spot on. He locked eyes with her and patted the couch next to him. Luna was still feeling awkward, but she shuffled over and took a seat next to him anyway. After a brief silence, Knox casually mentioned that his mother treated him the same way. Whoa, what a reveal. Totally blindsided Luna. Her jaw practically hit the floor. She was dying to hear more, but then Sierra stormed in. The moment she saw those two sitting close, her face turned the color of a tomato. She immediately went into panic mode, trying to shove Mr. Knox out the door, proclaiming he had no business being there. Knox tried to defend himself, but she wasn't having it. In the end, she practically booted him out with a loud harumph about protecting the lady's dignity. And just like that, the big boss of the estate was ousted by his own employee. Knox let out a long, tired sigh, realizing he nearly blabbed everything. This overwhelming urge to spill the beans hit him like a ton of bricks, making him recognize just how fond he had grown of Luna. That whole "please kill me" request from Lunathia was still haunting him. Finally, after what felt like forever, the big day arrived, and the picture-perfect newlyweds strutted through the Emperor's palace like they owned the place. Every eyeball in the room was glued to the bride and groom. Many were seeing Lunathia Hassel for the first time, and they were utterly stunned. The only one cracking a smile was the crown prince, happily eyeing the couple. The nobles couldn't stop chattering about the hermit dude who had suddenly come out of hiding. They also couldn't resist gossiping about Luna, whose dad had been so vocal about their romance. Picking up on the gossip, Lunathia started scanning for her family. Knox caught her vibe and suggested they make a beeline to Jandal. The guy was running the show since the emperor had ghosted. Lunathia processed this news and nodded in agreement. But just as she took a step, she heard a voice that made her stomach churn. Her eyes narrowed in disgust as she spotted the face she wished would vanish forever. There stood Rondell, her ex-fiancé, who had once made her life miserable. Meanwhile, Sol and Cynthia were waiting for their sister. Cynthia, distractedly thinking about Mark, called out to her brother. With her arms wide open, she asked if she looked adorable today. Sol was caught off guard by her random question, one she had been asking non-stop all morning. Cynthia yelled that this evening had to be flawless, and to top it all off, their mom and Rosalind were MIA while Dad was busy bowing to everyone like he was the king himself. Sol was left handling the rewarding gig of babysitting. He, like everyone else, had believed their family was living the dream until Luna's grand exit. Meanwhile, Rondell was throwing daggers at the charming newlyweds. Lunathia never thought she'd bump into him before her own family. Rondell seized the moment, chiming in about how the bride had gotten even more gorgeous. He claimed he could forget all that drama from before and urged her to reconsider their relationship. Lunathia felt her fury bubbling up and snapped back, demanding he repeat that nonsense. With an icy tone, she asked what exactly he meant by that. Rondell went beet red, insisting she was still head over heels for him. He leaned in, whispering like he was spinning a tale that would seal her fate, claiming he could blab about her little secret. Luna glanced at Knox, grateful she dodged a major bullet by not marrying Rondell. Surprisingly, the pathetic ex-fiancé's face lit up when she shot him a sweet smile. He thought she was finally coming around. Instead, she turned all formal on him like they were meeting for the first time. Her professional tone brought him back to reality with a thud. She added, sounding weary, that their engagement was history, and she wanted nothing to do with him ever again. Rondell, eyes wide, pointed at her, stunned, claiming she was the one who wanted this. Before he could pounce again, a solid hand landed on his shoulder like an anchor. Knox growled at the loser, asking if he thought he could actually threaten his wife. Knox warned him that if he messed up again, he'd turn his entire life into a dumpster fire. On top of that, he reminded him nobody would believe his sob story about the Hassel house's gift. Knox casually mentioned that Rondell was on thin ice and about to get tossed out of the second division for screwing up. Rondell's panic spiked when he realized Knox was well aware of that. Knox flatly stated that from this day forward, failure was all he'd know. He glared at him, firmly telling him to steer clear of his wife. Then he strolled back to Luna, sighing that he'd just wasted his time. The man tenderly caressed her hand as if she were delicate china. She beamed at him, agreeing wholeheartedly. They almost forgot about that pain in the neck, Rondell, until he popped up behind them again. She shot him a look that screamed, "Who even are you?" Rondell began ranting about how this was all wrong and that Luna was meant to be his bride. He yelled out in frustration that his perfect future was slipping away. He bit his lip in frustration, finger aimed right at Marcus. Unable to hold back any longer, he challenged Knox to a duel. His cockiness was so cringy that Knox couldn't help but roll his eyes. Luna, caught off guard, asked what he was even going on about. Rondell started quoting the imperial laws that allowed for all this nonsense. Luna yelled back that Knox didn't need to agree to such ridiculousness. Yet Knox was still ready to settle this matter for good. After a pregnant pause, Knox brought up his earlier chat about a fair fight. He asked if this was the desperate road he was taking, cornered like a rat. He chuckled, admitting he'd give him props for the audacity, and accepted the challenge. Lunathia tried to intervene, urging him not to engage in something so pointless, but he told her to hold her horses. The Crown Prince jumped into the commotion, clapping enthusiastically. It seemed he was the most excited about this unfolding drama. But he told her to back off. The Crown Prince leaped into the fray and started clapping. He seemed to be the one hoping for something like this to unfold the most. He flashed everyone a beaming smile and remarked that he'd overheard their riveting exchange. Lunathia shot a concerned glance at Prince Jindel, who noted that all the juicy action was happening around his pal and his future bride. Looks like he was trying to turn this whole shindig into a showstopper. He flashed a smirk and said it was way more exciting than some snooze-fest dance. Rondell thought he could snag some justice and asked for a duel like a real-life action hero. He added that if he won, he wanted to be Lunathia's fiancé again. Talk about a romantic plot twist. The prince waved his hand like he was casting a spell and said he was totally down for the showdown. Luna couldn't believe how quickly he jumped on that bandwagon. Jendel was doing the silent countdown, waiting for his buddy to drop some terms. Knox said with a chill vibe that his opponent better not even think about getting cozy with Luna again. The prince nodded, sealing the deal and grabbing everyone's attention like he was about to drop the mic. He was pumped to make this fight the event of the season. Jendel played the blame game, pointing at Luna like she was the witch in a fairy tale, saying it was all her fault these two were ready to throw down. The prince dramatically flung his arms open as if announcing the start of an epic opera, making quite the spectacle. He introduced the fighters. One was a knight and her once-upon-a-time fiancé, and the other was the guy known as the Holy Sword classic villain vibes. He claimed that not everyone gets to witness such a legendary showdown. The crowd was hyped, practically buzzing with excitement for the impending showdown. That's exactly why Prince Gandalf turned this duel into a must-see event. Lunathia had never seen Knox wield blades before, and suddenly she felt the sweat start to form. Since fencing was Randel's jam, she totally knew the true colors of her ex. What a nasty piece of work. Meanwhile, Knox caught on to the fact that his would-be bride was stressing about him. He smirked and confidently declared he wouldn't lose to that dimwit of a punk. Knox tossed in that it was all just a farce anyway, and Gendel would handle everything. His words boosted Lunathia's spirits, and she said she believed in him cheering from the sidelines. After that, Knox spaced out like a light bulb flickering on in his head. He suddenly wanted her to spill all her secrets if he came out on top. Lunathia was taken aback like, whoa, chill, because she wasn't ready for that. But in the end, she steeled her nerves and said, fine, let's do this. He just gave her a calm look, making her promise him something. Knox beamed and said now he had way more motivation. After a bit, the duel preparations were finally all set. Everyone there was frozen like deer in headlights, waiting for the grand spectacle to kick off under the moonlight. He ordered the duelists to receive their weapons as two identical swords were brought forth. Knox calmly snatched up a plain old blade, while Rondell looked like a cat on a hot tin roof sweating bullets. The prince stated that whoever knelt first would lose dignity and pride. Lunathia glanced at her opponent, who looked as serious as a kid, deciding which ice cream flavor to pick. Rondell told himself Knox's skills were from another era, like an old comic strip. He was running the numbers in his head on how badly he was about to get crushed. He knew he got into the division based on skills, despite the fact he had a sprightly gift. Rondell squeezed his eyes shut, trying to convince himself he was Hercules and unbeatable. He thought everything would go back to normal once he snagged this win. The prince announced the battle began, and their eyes met like two titans ready to clash. Rondell let out a cry and charged at his opponent like a bull at a gate. He swung to take Knox down with one mighty blow, but Knox blocked it like a pro. Talk about showing off. Everyone was buzzing to see Earl Allow snatch control of the duel. The nobles were convinced he had mad fencing skills. Rondell's cockiness even had Lunathia feeling a tad nervous. Jandel cracked a joke saying Knox was just flexing for his gal like always. The prince chimed in saying it would be a total yawn show if Knox flattened this dude right out of the gate. Knox was just putting on a show for the crowd, flexing his muscles like a bodybuilder in a competition, realizing that Lunathia figured he wasn't even breaking a sweat. The prince smirked, claiming that even he could take Rondell down with one finger. Knox could have taken him out with one punch, but he wanted to make a point, a lesson in humility, if you will. The prince casually remarked that even his epic patience had its limits. After that, Knox landed a punch that completely knocked Rondell out of the fight. In an instant, Rondell was face down in the dirt, looking like a total fool. Even the greedy nobles couldn't keep up with how fast he hit the ground. Rondell started to stammer, saying it was impossible, like a cartoon character. Knox just coldly replied that his defeat was visible from miles away. He claimed he couldn't lose to some kid who had never once smelled the battlefield. Knox shot a smirk, saying Rondell should have been practicing instead of chasing after Lunathia. Those words were the final nail in the coffin for Rondell's pride. He also reminded him to keep his promise to stay away from Lunathia. Rondell didn't dare utter a peep and shamefully turned his head away like a puppy caught in trouble. After that, the prince proudly introduced the new champ to the crowd. All the ladies immediately swarmed Knox, showering him with compliments like confetti. Lunathia was floored to see even her sister Cynthia racing after him in a frenzy. Cynthia started gushing about how amazing he was and how utterly thrilled she felt like a fangirl on a mission. She hurried to introduce herself, saying they had totally met before, but Knox just walked over to Luna like he was in a music video. Turns out the Marquis only cared about getting high fives from one gal. Luna gave him a warm smile and genuinely congratulated him on his victory, acknowledging that Cynthia wanted to chat with him too. Knox just shrugged it off, saying he wasn't interested in loud women talk about cold. Lunathia was shocked since Cynthia usually had every guy wrapped around her little finger. Only Mr. Knox was unaffected by her charms. The guy snapped her back to reality, reminding her about their deal's terms. The girl put her hand firmly on her chest and confidently declared she'd tell him everything. Meanwhile, the knights kept guarding the ruckus at the palace. They were scratching their heads, clueless about all the ruckus going on. Orders were barked to beef up security around the palace, just in case. Cynthia wanted to have a chat with him. Knox just kept his cool, saying he wasn't interested in loud women, the ultimate power move. Lunathia was baffled since Cynthia had a knack for getting guys hypnotized. Only Mr. Knox could stand strong against her charm offensive. The guy snapped her back to reality, reminding her about their deal's terms. The girl put her hand firmly on her chest and said she would spill everything. Meanwhile, the knights continued their diligent watch over the noisy palace, still baffled by the commotion. Orders were issued to step up security just to be safe. But guess what? Nobody showed up. The guards were totally oblivious that a criminal mastermind was pulling the strings. This dude was on a mission to take down the big bad who wrecked his homeland and his dad. That guy had a twisted smile plastered on his face, itching to get his own brand of justice. Meanwhile, Luna was itching to split so she could have some alone time with him. Knox was like, "Let's talk about this when we're home, unless you plan on making a run for it." The girl beamed and said he'd become her home too. Cue the warm fuzzies. She couldn't help but wonder which other family members decided to show up to this shindig. The crown prince strolled over, complimenting their theatrical performance. "Wouldn't expect anything less from my best pal," he added with a grin. The prince grinned and remarked how Luna had fallen head over heels for Knox again while watching their duel. She met his eager gaze and awkwardly muttered, "You could say that." The poor girl was totally flustered and didn't know what to do with herself. To ease the awkwardness, the prince asked if he could have a word with Knox in private. He wanted to dive deeper into the Moonlight Glade search. Knox was totally bummed that work had crashed the party vibe. He grumbled an apology, explaining that Gendel was like a dog with a bone and wouldn't let him off the hook. Lunathia beamed, saying she was cool, chilling alone. Knox wasn't buying her everything's fine charade for a second. In the end, the prince dragged him away, but not before showering compliments on his wife. Lunathia was over the moon to finally munch on some food. Ever since losing her sense of taste, her appetite had tanked, and she had to make up wild excuses. She told Sierra she just wanted to slim down, which only made Sierra freak out more. That's why she decided to whip up a few snacks. She barely made it to the table before Sol lunged at her. He immediately started grilling her about how she was doing and if everything was all right. The girl replied with a yes and hoped he was doing okay too. Despite being twins, their personalities were like chalk and cheese. He pleaded with her, saying the whole family was waiting for her to return. He asked her to spill the beans if that creep of a Marquis was keeping her locked up in his mansion. She tried to explain about Knox, but they cut her off before she could finish. Nicholas showed up with this fake joy, calling her his precious little darling. The girl felt instantly nauseous by how fake he was acting. He told her not to forget her family, who were practically begging for her to visit. He was seriously trying to put on this whole act of being a caring, loving dad. But all you could see in his eyes was the desire for her to ditch her fiancé and come back to him. Luna was done taking orders from her family and was ready to shut that down for good. She froze him out, saying she was done being a pain in the rear. Nicholas was blindsided, his face burning with fury. She declared she'd be a Hassel no more in no time. Cold as ice, she said her ties to the Hassel family were toast. Nicholas' teeth ground together as she mentioned her family wouldn't be coming to the aid of the Hassels ever again. She said that after the wedding, her fiancé wouldn't be giving them a lifeline either. Basically, she laid it out clear everyone was wise to his little nobility con. It looked like the crowd around them was starting to catch on to Nicholas's nonsense. The guy spun around, panic flooding his face, suddenly feeling like the scummiest of scum. Luna also demanded he hand over the agreement with Knox. The guy snapped back at his daughter, claiming he was using the Marquis title to shield their family. He tried to paint her as ungrateful, but she just echoed her previous words. Luna squashed his dreams right then and there, telling him they weren't family anymore. She walked off, adding that raising his voice was a serious faux pas. Before exiting the hall, she warned him not to let her down again. Afterwards, she found herself on the balcony, feeling the heavy weight of exhaustion. She knew there was no way she could just bail from the Imperial Palace. Luna decided to head back inside when she caught wind of someone talking. She whipped around and spotted Knox's younger brother chilling there. He asked if he could keep her company, claiming he felt a bit lightheaded. Luna couldn't say no, knowing how fragile he was. She was surprised he showed up to the party solo and without his fiancée. As she recalled seeing her mother, Countess Fonda Lord Suk explained she just wasn't a fan of Knox. Luna grinned knowingly, getting a sense of the girl's fiery personality. Suk chuckled, saying he'd managed to work his charm and convinced her to come. He remembered her grumbling about showing up after work. The young man laughed, calling her a handful, then decided to get real. He was genuinely rooting for her and Knox's relationship. He said he was thrilled Knox had finally found someone who could see past his tough exterior. Suk added that his brother had been through some tough times, and he wished he could find happiness again. He noticed Luna's bemused expression and said he had a secret to share. He was gearing up to reveal a long-held secret of the Iltern clan. Turns out Suk and Knox had different moms. Knox's mom was actually his mom's sister. Their dad was officially engaged to her, but he was secretly head over heels for Knox's mom. That's how their little affair resulted in Knox's arrival. After Knox was born, their father kind of lost interest in his fiancée. When Suk's mom uncovered the truth, she lost her mind. She couldn't bear the thought of her sister having a child with her husband. The universe responded to her prayers. Her sister died in childbirth. Knox always claimed they were full siblings, but his stepmother couldn't stand the sight of him. Before long, everyone seemed to forget the eldest son even existed. Surprise, surprise, he was actually his mother's sister's kid. Their father was engaged to her, but had a secret crush on Knox's mom. Hence the scandalous affair that led to Knox's debut. After Knox arrived, their dad pretty much ghosted his fiancée. When Suk's mom got wind of the situation, she lost it. She couldn't even think about her sister bearing a child with her husband. It seemed the woman's prayers were answered. Her sister's demise during childbirth was the cherry on top. Knox had constantly touted them as full siblings, but his stepmom couldn't stand him. Soon enough, everyone forgot the eldest son entirely. Prayers were answered. Her sister perished during childbirth. Knox always said they were full siblings, but his stepmother had a major issue with him. Soon enough, everyone forgot the eldest son even existed. Suk spilled the beans that his mom was the one really pushing him to become the big cheese at Iltern. According to the rules, the oldest should have snagged the spot, and poor Suk was already dealing with health issues since day one. The little bro was totally chill with Dad passing the crown to Knox. He still felt the mom guilt since everyone but Dad seemed to be under her spell. She even struck a deal with him. Whoever popped out a kid first would score the title. Lunathia suddenly recalled what Ruby mentioned about baby making. Suk added with a sigh that under Mom's orders, Knox was carted off to war. He recalled running out like a kid on Christmas to welcome his victorious bro back. But to his surprise, Knox didn't mirror his excitement. Suk caught the shift in his vibe and suggested he just kick back for a bit. Out of nowhere, his mom showed up behind Suk and ordered him to steer clear of Knox. She threw some shade at Knox, wishing he had kicked the bucket in battle. Suk noticed Lunathia's jaw drop and remarked how his mom had always been a piece of work. That's exactly why he wanted Knox and Lunathia to have a mini-me ASAP. This totally clashed with their original plan, leaving Lunathia feeling like she was carrying the weight of the world. She blushed like a tomato when she got the hint. Suk, bless his heart, thought they were just gearing up for family planning after tying the knot. But they were in a whole different ballpark. Lunathia knew her future looked grim, and babies were off the table. Suk realized they had been chatting way too long and urged her to look after his brother. He noted how much Knox had changed since Lunathia came into the picture, but she seemed completely oblivious to the transformation. There were plenty of things she hadn't picked up on, but she wanted to stick with Knox through thick and thin. After that, Suk flashed a smile and dashed back to the hall. Lunathia gazed over the garden below and spotted Cynthia out of nowhere. She was puzzled about what her sister was doing all alone in a spot like that. It looked like the girl was planning some sort of ambush. Sook barely made it out when he caught sight of Lunathia looking surprised. She thanked him for the juicy gossip and said all she could do was be there for him. Lord Sook beamed warmly and said that was more than enough. He earnestly asked her to step up as a real family for his brother. She couldn't promise anything concrete, but he took off before she could say much. Just as he left the balcony, a panicked soul came rushing up to her. He wanted to know if she'd seen Cynthia and launched into a tale about how she flipped out. She was in full-on meltdown mode over a lost earring and had him searching like a headless chicken. He was told to keep an eye out, but the second he turned around, poof, she was gone. That's when Luna realized Cynthia had been spying on Knox's brawl. The girl was about to spill the beans on where she last saw her sister when they were interrupted. Standing in front of them was Soul's teacher, grinning like he just heard the best joke ever. The kid froze, completely flabbergasted to see his old-school instructor. He explained he had served with Iltern during the war, so naturally he had to pop by. Then he reminded Soleil in a not-so-nice way that he skipped his combat exam yesterday. The teacher started barking threats at Soleil, saying he'd tattled to his family about his terrible attendance. He also suggested it was time he started looking up to Lord Ilter instead of skipping out on exams. He yanked Soul by the ear, saying he was dragging him in for a retake. Lunathia seized the moment, ditching the Lord's drama and announcing she was off to find her sister. Cynthia might be a spoiled brat, but she listened to her big sis when it counted. Sook didn't want to let the girl go solo and offered to tag along. Lunathia smiled, warning him that his fiancé might get a bit cranky. But in the end, she took off to search for Cynthia anyway. She roamed the garden for what felt like forever, hunting down that annoying little pest. With her terrible eyesight, Lunathia started to feel a bit jumpy. Toss in the fact that she'd lost her sense of taste, and it was just one big bummer. Because of that, she felt it would be impossible to step up as a wife and support for the mares. She had this nagging sense that she wouldn't make it past 6 months. Then she froze in horror when she spotted a body lying there. It was a guard who was supposed to be on palace duty face first in the dirt. The girl dashed over to check him out, quickly discovering a gaping, bloody wound. It hadn't really hit her how serious it was until she locked eyes with his vacant stare. What she saw freaked her out so much that she let out a scream. She checked his chest real fast and realized Cynthia might be in a world of trouble. Lunathia dropped to her knees, totally oblivious to the fact that another guy had shown up. It was Knox's cheerful little brother who had been on a manhunt for Luna. He explained how he caught sight of Cynthia bolting after she took off. She found the earring, but Big Brother gave her a piece of his mind for it. Luna sighed in relief, thankful that Cynthia was safe. The guy grinned again, revealing he decided to tail her to the garden after hearing the commotion. He reassured her that Ruby would just give him a talking to if things went south. They were chatting away like old pals, so relaxed that they didn't even notice the psycho lurking nearby. They only clocked him when his blade was already pressed against Lunathia's throat. Meanwhile, Knox and Gendel had stepped aside to talk shop. He asked if Nukes thought the moonlit glade was real. Nukes just shrugged, saying they wouldn't know for certain until they stumbled upon it. The prince chuckled, saying the guy was as hopeful as ever. He grimly noted that he was nearly out of time, and the Empire could be teetering on the edge of disaster. Knox asked just how dire the situation in the Empire really was. He also pointed out that the Emperor and Empress were MIA from tonight's festivities. Jandal shot back coldly, claiming they had some pressing business come up. Knox asked just how dire the Empire's situation really was. He also noted that the Emperor and Empress were MIA from tonight's gathering. Jandal merely offered a cold reply, saying they had some urgent business come up. Chillaxing like a pro, he took another sip of his tea. The prince set his cup aside and casually asked if Lunathia was in the loop about the hunt for Moonlight Glade. Knox chimed in with a little detail she was missing. She's completely clueless about the real deal. She thinks it's all about his bride. The prince gave him a nod of approval for keeping the juicy secret under wraps. Gendel got it. Knox was scared everyone would know about her superpowers. The prince threw in that he could have forced her to help with the search. Knox hesitated. He wasn't about to throw his wife into that kind of chaos. The prince chuckled and told him to lighten up. He halted Knox mid-serious face, promising one last nugget of wisdom before bouncing. The grin got wiped off his face when he labeled him a hermit. He dropped a truth bomb after all those skirmishes. He had a boatload of enemies threatening Luna. The prince wasn't kidding when he told Knox to keep his head on a swivel. Meanwhile, Luna's life was hanging by a thread. The creepy dude wanted to know if she was the bride of the devil. She wasn't about to spill the beans and shot back with, "Who the heck are you?" He smirked, saying he was a survivor from the kingdom of Chevelon. Luna's memory jogged. That kingdom had attempted to wage war against them, and they got their tails whooped. The guy clenched his jaw, revealing that Knox put his soldier father in the grave. As he wept, he begged to go home to his family before meeting his maker. Knox iced him out without breaking a sweat. So now this joker wanted payback, and he was ready to throw a full-on tantrum about it. The crazy man started howling about avenging himself personally. After the war, folks were eager for blood, clueless about the real drama that unfolded on the battlefield. Luna thought things might be more complicated than that. But hey, he was off in his own world, ranting about taking away what he cherished most. He pushed the knife closer and claimed it would be his. Sook leaped into action, demanding he release the girl at once. Apparently threats didn't faze this nutjob. He looked delighted to see Knox's brother announcing he'd be joining the girl in the afterlife. Talk about losing his marbles. He was convinced he had nothing left to lose. Luna's mind raced back to the time she pleaded with him to end it if she ever became a burden. She realized this dude was hell-bent on taking them both out, but she had her own mission she wanted to be by Knox's side until she couldn't feel, see, or hear anything anymore. That's when she decided to peek in. The instant her hand touched the nutcase, a wave of info bombarded her. She caught flashes of Sook trying to shield her from something nasty. He was gearing up to tackle the psycho, trying to give Luna a chance to break free. But that move would be a one-way ticket for him. Luna figured out this guy was aiming to remove them both from the equation. Then just like that, the visions cut off and she snapped back to reality. She couldn't just stand around while that lunatic was about to stab the Lord. He had no clue where the knife would land, but he was determined to keep her safe till the end. Lunathia screamed, realizing he was about to get nailed. She lunged at the maniac and shoved him, buying them a few precious moments. Then she snatched the Lord's hand and bolted. She started shouting at the top of her lungs about the killer, praying someone might hear them. Unfortunately, the Lord's poor health decided to stage a revolt. He crumpled to his knees, ready to cough up a lung after all that sprinting. Luna freaked out even more when she saw his face twisted in agony. She scrambled to think of a way to get him breathing again. It didn't sit right with her that there wasn't a single guard around. They should have raced for the hall entrance, but Sook was done with the running game. He was willing to throw himself in the fire if it meant Luna could escape. No way she was letting that go down. She told him she wasn't leaving him behind. The guy suggested he'd just hide in the bushes and catch up later, but Luna figured he might be feeding her a line to get her to skedaddle. She touched his hands and decided to see what happened if she took off. The next thing she knew, she was zooming toward the garden, leaving him solo. In a blink, the psycho pounced on him and raised his knife. The next scene was Lord Sook sprawled out in a pool of his own blood. She felt completely drained, just like he was. Yet she couldn't just leave him there to kick the bucket. She volunteered to distract the psycho while the Lord made a run for it. Luna figured he stood a better chance finding the entrance in the dark. The Lord tried to stop her, but she charged right ahead. She assured him not to fret because she wouldn't let anyone die. As soon as she heard that familiar rustle, she bolted. She managed to redirect the maniac's focus onto her. Luna ran as fast as her legs could take her, praying the Lord had made it to the garden. She sensed herself getting heavier with every passing moment. The tipping point came when she tripped over a rock and went down hard, feeling pain all over. She hesitated just for a flicker of a second, and that's when the bloodthirsty psycho loomed over her. He was practically drooling, saying she was a feisty gal. The guy flashed a twisted grin, saying she'd be his first. His face contorted with rage, and he swore he'd make that devil pay. The girl froze, bracing for the end. Then, out of nowhere, he blocked the attack, proclaiming he could take the guy down even with a practiced sword. No sooner had he said it than he knocked the knife straight out of the psycho's hand. He seized his opportunity while the dude was shell-shocked and crashed him to the ground. Still, she couldn't just leave him here to bite the dust. She said she'd distract the psycho so the Lord could make a run for it. Luna added that he'd have a better chance finding the entrance in the dark. The Lord tried to stop her, but she charged right ahead anyway. She told him not to stress it and promised she wouldn't let anyone kick the bucket. The moment she heard that familiar rustle, she dashed forward. She somehow managed to get the crazed dude to focus on her instead of his knife collection. Luna took off like a rocket, praying the Lord made it to the garden. She could feel herself getting heavier than a Thanksgiving turkey with every step. The point of no return came when she tripped over a sneaky little rock. She went down like a sack of potatoes, feeling every inch of the ground's hospitality. For just a split second, she hesitated, and that's when the bloodthirsty nutjob loomed over her like a bad haircut. He was practically drooling, saying she was a real firecracker for a gal. The guy flashed a twisted grin and announced she'd be his first. His face twisted with rage, and he swore he'd make that jerk pay. The girl froze up, bracing for the worst. And then, out of nowhere, Mr. Knox was right there in her face. He blocked the incoming chaos and said he could take him down, even armed with a practice sword. No sooner had he said it than he knocked the knife clean out of the maniac's hand. Seizing his moment while the psycho was stunned, he slammed him to the ground like it was a wrestling match. Who needs a sword when you can throw a punch that sends a psycho crumbling like a cheap suit? He ended that brawl right there, boot-pinning the maniac into the dirt like a nail in a board. He hoisted his pretend sword and asked the guy if he had any idea whose girlfriend he was messing with. Knox threw in that the only reason the psycho was lucky was because his weapon was made of wood. That's when the maniac started yelping like a puppy when Knox brought that knife near his noggin, saying he was about to take a little trip to meet his maker. In a flash, Knox ditched the psycho and dashed over to check on Lunathia. He gently touched her cheek and apologized for being late. His face was like a canvas of worry as he asked if she was hurt. The girl smiled and said everything was A-OK before asking how he found her. Turns out Soul went into full meltdown mode because he couldn't track her down. Knox felt a twinge of unease, so he marched straight to the garden and bumped into Suk. At that moment, Suk came barreling in with his fiancée. Luna's jaw dropped as she stared at the familiar face. As it turns out, she was meant to catch a glimpse of the Lord meeting his demise in a vision. To her shock, Ruby thanked her for helping the Lord make a getaway. The young dude chimed in saying he got to meet Ruby and Knox too. After that, he wouldn't stop gushing about how brave Luna was. The girl scrambled to look anywhere but his face, trying to downplay her heroics. Even sassy Ruby jumped in to thank her personally, making it even more comically awkward. Luna was flabbergasted, standing there like a deer in headlights. Knox explained that Ruby was just worried about her and wanted to lift her spirits. Ruby shot back at him to zip it, calling him a real work of art. Lunathia couldn't help but grin, realizing she had saved a life and got awesome help from Knox. She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, but then bam, pain shot through her body like a lightning bolt. Every time she relied on her powers, it felt like running a marathon and face-planting at the finish line. Her head throbbed so bad she started wailing like a cat in a bathtub. The pain was so intense she thought she might just crumple to the floor. Lunathia clutched her head, feeling like someone was using her ears as a tug-of-war rope. She finally stirred awake a couple of days later in her cozy bed. She was in full panic mode, trying to rewind the clock on what the heck had happened. She recalled that they had arrived at the ball, and then Knox got into it with Rondell. Lunathia put her thinking cap back on, trying to piece those lost memories back together. Finally, she locked onto the moment she was attacked. That pivotal memory stuck like glue in her mind. The girl remembered how Master Knox had shielded her, but everything else was just blanks. She was wrestling with what transpired next when Sierra barged in. Luna turned to greet the maid, who almost broke into a waterworks show when she saw her. But then Luna suddenly realized she couldn't hear a single word the maid was babbling about. The moment Sierra figured that out, she sprinted off like a bat out of hell toward Master Knox. Watching that, Luna finally connected the dots about all that had gone down. She touched her ears and discovered she had gone deaf. It was because she had predicted the future, not once, but twice already. She thought she was prepared for something like this. But reality crashed down like a lead balloon. In an instant, she felt completely isolated from the world. A few minutes later, Master Knox burst into the room and immediately noticed that the girl was as silent as a stone. He gently squeezed her shoulder, trying to let her know he was there. Like everything was normal, she turned and greeted her husband. Knox was completely confuzzled by how she could keep a smile on her face. He didn't say another peep and just pulled her in close. Luna was trying to decipher what his deal was, but he just kept mum. He thanked the heavens out loud that she finally woke up. And the girl was totally blown away when she realized she could hear Knox. He told her it had been 2 weeks since she plopped down unconscious in the garden, still nestled in his arms. She asked in disbelief if she had really been snoozing for that long. He replied with a hint of bitterness that he was scared she might not wake up. For a split second, he was convinced she was gone forever. He continued that even after seeing so much death, he wasn't prepared for her to join that list. He struggled to show his emotions, but right now, he just couldn't keep those walls up. He held her even tighter and confessed he didn't want to lose her. Luna's heart swelled, and she beamed at him, saying she was genuinely happy at that moment. She caressed his back and said it felt great to hear those words. He stared deep into her eyes like he was trying to crack a code. Knox pointed out that first she lost sight in one eye, and then her hearing started to vanish. The girl, startled, asked how he could have known that. He told her she didn't even flinch when he barreled into the room. He was about to rattle off her symptoms, but she cut him off like a pro. She told him to hold his horses on any more of his theories. Lunathia smiled and reminded him that she promised to fill him in on everything herself. Knox nodded and suggested they have a chat over some tea. Lunathia couldn't quite figure out why they were huddling so close. The guy leaned in and whispered it was the only way to make sure she heard him without any hiccups. The whole thing felt bizarre. Even Urine took the exit with a smirk plastered on her face. Knox decided it was time to lay down the real reason for their little rendezvous. He put 2 and 2 together, that all these new changes were the price of her powers, so she decided to spill the beans about the grim future she foresaw. Knox sadly put the pieces together about the real reason she wanted him to call it quits. The girl looked down, confirming he had hit the nail on the head. Knox asked if her family genuinely couldn't see what she was enduring. He quickly realized that was a stupid question and apologized immediately. There was a touch of sorrow in his voice when he remarked that they were merely using her. The girl explained that she just wanted them to genuinely love her. That hit Knox like a ton of bricks, and he pulled his wife in closer. His voice was laced with a hint of sadness as he told her they were just using her. The girl admitted she just wanted love, cue the tears. This struck a chord with Knox, and he pulled his wife in even tighter. She dropped the bomb on him, saying she only had 6 months left to kick it. But hey, at least she felt a weight lift off her shoulders, finally confiding in someone. The girl had zero idea how Knox would react, just sitting there waiting for him to say something, anything at all. Instead, he just nudged her back a smidge. Then, super slow and careful, he popped up and gave his wife a glance. Next thing you know, he's off like a rocket toward the exit, telling her to hold tight for a hot second. He called out to Urine, knowing he was totally eavesdropping. Urine peeked out from behind the door, looking guilty as charged, and claimed he was just modestly passing by. Knox was like, "I ain't got time for that," and told him to grab something from the expedition stash. The minute Urine scurried off, Knox turned back to Lunathia. He let her know it was time to spill the beans. Knox decided to lay down some knowledge about moongrass. He plopped her back on his lap, ready to share some serious wisdom. The guy was gently running his fingers through her hair when he decided to pivot. While she was catching some Z's, they managed to interrogate some witnesses about the nut job. Since she wasn't feeling up to the task, they hit pause on the case and left the creep in cuffs. Luna was feeling some serious guilt, thinking she slowed the investigation down. She tried to apologize, but Knox was more in the blame game, claiming he was the one who put her in hot water because of his fancy title. To his shock, Luna perked up, telling him not to mope around like that. She flashed a smile and reminded him they were family, and it wasn't on him. Knox just whispered back, trying to keep her from worrying about his mess-ups. It was like he was shouting from the rooftops, and he didn't want Luna to catch wind of it. So the royal fam took the heat for keeping the perp locked up. They dropped the ball and let him in, which is why Jendal shot off a letter. During the grilling, it came out that someone helped him bust into the palace. Luna shot a question about whether he had a partner in crime. Knox said this accomplice knew about the engagement shindig. Clearly, they were just pawns in a scheme to take out the Empress. Back home, she was known as the Divine Guardian Mikula von Lysandras. Thanks to her military genius, they totally crushed the last war. Even though the Emperor had a full-on harem, she's the one who gave him an heir. A bunch of nobles were fuming over how much sway she had in every nook and cranny of the empire. Jendal was the first to float that theory right after the banquet. Jendal said they spotted someone near his mother's quarters. The guards claimed to see someone lurking around the Empress's chambers when she wasn't expecting a visitor. The theory is he slipped out unnoticed during the garden shenanigans. During questioning, the accomplice mentioned the Empress wasn't feeling her best and knew a family secret. Only those snug with the royal family could be in the know about that. Knox figured it might even be someone from the upper crust, tightly connected to the royal crowd. Jendal told Knox to take the lead on the investigation and track down Moonglade. That assignment landed on Knox like a ton of bricks, but he couldn't back down. Lunathia nearly passed out when she heard Her Majesty was sick. Knox told her they were keeping her serious illness under wraps. It was incurable, and all the royal family could do was play the waiting game to keep her alive, so the assassin knew the Empress wouldn't be able to lift a finger. They chose a moment when she'd be at her most vulnerable. If the attack panned out, they could easily cover it up as just another day in the life of the disease. There's a solid chance the Emperor's concubines were in on the deal. Knox explained that's why he got ordered to find the Moonlight Clearing, saying he needed it for the most gorgeous rock of all. He let on that there weren't any rocks there, but instead, they've got petals with some serious healing mojo. According to the scrolls, petal tea could cure any ailment. Turns out the whole gem thing was just a cheap ploy. The stone script spun a tale about a flower that could bring people back to life. Lunathia echoed why he was sent looking for the Moonlight Meadow. Knox nodded in agreement, saying that flower was the Empress's only shot at bouncing back. It not only tackled sickness, but also brought back lost sight and hearing. The girl froze in surprise, trying to grasp what he was hinting at. Knox whispered softly that he wanted to save her from what lay ahead. He boldly declared he would find the flower and help restore her lost senses. Luna stared at him, surprised by his talk of the future. He had zero guarantees the flowers would sort her out, but he was all in for a gamble. He wanted to give her the bright and shiny future she rightfully deserved. Lunathia couldn't wrap her head around the fact that this guy was ready to go to bat for her like that. She wanted to say something, but her voice was trapped guilt weighing her down as she looked down. The girl still thanked him for his genuine care and kindness. She looked up and said she wanted to help him find the Moonlight Glade. Knox gave his approval, but gently asked her to take it easy with her powers. The girl beamed and asked him to promise her something in return. She casually requested that if things went south, he'd end her misery. Luna tossed it out so nonchalantly it made his stomach do a backflip. Still, he couldn't turn her down after she'd put it out there for so long. Urine reappeared, showing them the thing they'd sent him to grab. Knox eyed the slab and reminded Luna he'd mentioned it before. This stone tablet spun the tale of the Lunar Glade. The girl dove straight into examining the tablet like a detective on a case. It says right here that the truth will be visible to anyone who gazes at the moon. Knox was rattled to discover that Luna's ancestors' writings were in the same style. Urine was pumped since before it took them ages to decipher the lines, but gently asked her to take it easy with her powers. The girl beamed and asked him to promise her something in return. She asked him to, end things for her if they failed. Luna tossed it out so casually it made his stomach drop like a rock. Still, he couldn't say no after she'd been asking for eons. Urine popped back in with the item they'd requested. Knox glanced at the slab and reminded Luna that he'd mentioned it before. This stone tablet unveiled the story of the Lunar Glade. The girl immediately zeroed in on examining the tablet closely. It says in big bold letters that the truth will be seen by whoever looks at the moon. Knox was taken aback that Luna's ancestors' memoirs were in the same writing style. Urine was over the moon, since before it had taken them weeks to crack the code. The girl was jumping for joy when she realized she could actually be of help. It felt like winning the lottery for her since she could assist Knox without the need for her powers. Urine started to say something, but then burst out laughing instead. He quietly remarked that they were acting more like a couple of old geezers. Urine confessed Knox had been going all out taking care of her for the past few weeks. Luna had a tough time believing she meant that much to Knox. Urine made a hasty exit when Knox started grilling him about their whispering. Luna wondered if she could ever truly be a real wife to her hubby. A week later, the girl was still grinding away at the translation. She managed to decode most of the tablets faster than a kid can inhale candy. She was so focused, even Sierra struggled to drag her away for a break. A smile crept across Luna's face, showing she hadn't heard a thing. Sierra inhaled, then let out a loud scream in the next moment. Sierra said she totally sympathized with her feelings and was thrilled that Knox might find a cure. Just like with the Empress, Knox only spilled half the beans to the servants about Luna. The maid once again pointed out that she was expected and suggested a wardrobe change. Lunathia still didn't get it, but she couldn't say no. Eventually, she discovered Lord Suk and his fiancée had come to see her. The girl rushed to apologize for keeping them on ice. She confessed she hadn't even expected them to drop by. The Lord beamed and asked how she was feeling. Ruby complained about coming to this podunk place, but she was there for important business. Luna barely caught what the lovebirds were saying, but figured it out quickly enough. She decided to get to the point and address why they were really there. Knox then popped up behind her, announcing that Ruby had something for her. She gestured to a chest and said her mother had taken care of Knox's request. Knox reached for the box, claiming he'd had it specifically made just for her. Turns out he had it custom built. Lunathia was completely blown away when she held the box. She squinted at the peculiar object, pondering what in the world it was. Knox explained it was a hearing aid, meant to help her hear better. Ruby immediately yelled at them to stop with the mushy stuff in front of the visitors. Apparently, they had hammered out a peace treaty with the kingdom across the sea. In return for peace, they promised to lend a hand to each other, tech included. This device allowed her to keep up with the chatter like everyone else. Lunathia kept eyeing the strange contraption like it was from another planet. Duchess Fan whipped it up. She had connections out of this world. Knox penned her a personal note, a request she had no choice but to fulfill. Ruby cheekily mentioned she should consider it her thank you for saving the Lord. Looks like Lunathia was still in shock from the surprise. Lord Suk tried to explain gently that it was Ruby's way of showing gratitude. Knox just sighed, too exhausted to deal with that drama. Lunathia grinned from ear to ear and thanked them for the incredible gift. Later that evening, the girl found herself hanging solo in her room. She was over the moon about getting a little closer to Ruby. They seemed like a perfect match, personalities all meshing together like peanut butter and jelly. Lunathia herself was trying to finish up her work on the cipher. Suddenly, she remembered the letter she'd received earlier. Sol had decided to reach out after that little embarrassment at the banquet. Her entire family knew she had passed out, but Sol was the only one who seemed genuinely worried about her. She smiled, thinking it'd be awesome to at least keep in touch with him. The girl froze suddenly, hearing a distinctive knock at the door. Knox strolled in and noticed she was now hearing every tiny sound like it was the 4th of July. Lunathia grinned, saying she could hear everything, as if she'd never lost her hearing at all. He sat down and informed her Ruby didn't know the real reason she needed the device. The guy added that he wouldn't be able to help if she lost her hearing, which really put a damper on things. He looked down and said he could only grant her wishes. The girl blushed, realizing he still remembered her diary. The man nodded, stating he'd already granted one of her wishes. He asked her to let him know if there was anything else she wanted. At first, she was shocked, but then a bright smile lit up her face. She said sincerely that she'd be so grateful if he'd just stick around and share these moments with her. Man, she looked absolutely adorable at that moment. The Marquis' heart skipped a beat. She caught the shift in his vibe. Even though he tried to play it cool, he was all, "Oh, it's nothing." But his expression was totally giving him away. He scratched his head and casually mentioned he could only make her dreams come true. The girl turned red as a tomato, realizing he still had her diary on his mind. The guy nodded and revealed he had already granted one of her wishes. He asked her if there was anything else on her wish list. At first, she was taken aback, but then her face lit up brighter than a Christmas tree. She earnestly told him she'd be over the moon if he could just share these moments with her. Wow, she was looking ridiculously adorable at that moment. The Marquis felt like it had a mini heart attack. She noticed a change in his vibe. Even though he was trying to act nonchalant, he was totally like, "Oh, it's nothing." But his face was like a terrible poker player spilling all the secrets. Knox jumped in, saying they had to stop by and see someone before anything else. Turns out the Empress wanted to chat with her outside the palace walls. She was totally stunned when she found out. The Empress wanted to say sorry face to face. Meanwhile, Lunathia's old man was still hitting the bottle like there was no tomorrow, a real boozer. After downing another bottle, Nicholas was acting less like a human and more like a wild animal. His wife tried to warn him he was digging his own grave, but he didn't care one bit. Once his lies blew up, even their most loyal customers took off. It got so bad that even Rosalind ditched them for no apparent reason. His rant came to an awkward halt when the maid announced a visitor had arrived. With him being smashed, Nicholas didn't even register who it was at first. The maid attempted to introduce him, but he cut her off quicker than a kid cutting into the dessert line. The guy was hiding his face behind a top hat and said he was sorry for popping in unannounced. Nicholas bolted upright, shocked that a person of that caliber was in his living room. The man waved his hand, stating his client would be willing to fork over some serious cash for a deal. Nicholas froze when he added that this gig was hush-hush. He smirked just a tad and mentioned it involved the Emperor's family. Meanwhile, Jendal was back at it, checking on his sick mom for what felt like the 1,000th time. Spoiler alert, nobody's cracked the code for her recovery yet. He was itching to help, but she shot him down and reminded him that the drama-filled visitors were due any minute now. Jendal rolled with it, saying it was a real treat for them to have a front-row seat to see her. The lady wanted him to ring for the servants to help with her wardrobe change. He tried to lay it out for her, maybe pushing it wasn't the best move given her state. The woman beamed at her caring son and insisted she'd be just fine. She added she needed to stick around for her cherished kingdom and dear boy. On their way to the Empress, Lunathia was curious if she had met this gal before. Knox painted her as a strong woman with a golden heart, a brain sharper than attack, and a sense of humor that'll knock your socks off. Lunathia prompted him to spill the beans on how he and Jandal became pals. He told her they first crossed paths while he was hitting the books at the Knight Orders Academy. The top students got the golden ticket to train at the palace, and he went there with Urine plus a crew of 30 other eager beavers. That's when Knox encountered a spy with more suspicion than a raccoon in a trash can, sneaky as they come, and plotted to mess with the royal family's kid. Knox swooped in and saved the day, which clearly impressed Jendal. The kid declared the spy was acting fishy from the get-go. When Jendal heard that, he just erupted with laughter, calling Knox a total legend. The dude looked at the prince like he just realized he stumbled into a lion's den when Jendal declared he'd be the next head of Iltern. After that, the prince flashed a grin and took a shining to him. He extended his hand and dubbed Knox just a regular Joe who wasn't about chasing fame. Meanwhile, Knox clicked with Urine, and they set sail for war together. Being the fourth son of an Imperial Army general gave him about as much chance of taking charge as a goldfish winning the Indy 500. Luna couldn't believe how long they'd all been in each other's orbit. Jendal's mother was the living embodiment of all the best traits that Jendal had. Knowing her time was ticking away, Luna hopped out of the carriage. She took a moment to soak in the stunning eye candy that surrounded her. After that, Knox grabbed her hand and led her to their meetup spot. A mansion for the Empress was crafted in a locale that could have been a postcard. Knox filled her in that the Emperor had created it just for her relaxation sessions. But the romance fizzled out fast, knowing that an assassin could be lurking among the loyal subjects like a bad smell. Knox suddenly froze, then told Lunathia to hit the brakes. She stopped so quickly she could have been a cartoon flabbergasted, eavesdropping on everything around them. She turned and unexpectedly laid eyes on two unfamiliar faces. The lady was one of the Emperor's sidekicks, but the man next to her, no idea. He sized Knox up and mentioned he hadn't expected to bump into him here. The fella tipped his hat trying to act like a gent, but it felt as genuine as a $3 bill. He quipped that it was rare to find a recluse lurking around the estate. The man shot a question about whether they'd come to meet the Empress in person. Suddenly, Luna's light bulb went off. Standing right in front of her was Marquis Latria, a dude with serious pull right up there with Knox. Plus, he and the big guy had a friendship that dated back longer than most soap operas. She recalled he was a no-show at the engagement party. Knox offered the Marquis a polite nod and affirmed what he'd said. Marquis Latria jumped right into asking what brought them there. Knox explained that his fiancée had faced an attack at the palace during the reception. Lunathia was relieved this little mishap hadn't blown up, and there weren't any new scandals surrounding Knox. The Marquis grinned, hinting that was why he wasn't flying solo. Lunathia stepped up, deciding to break the ice and introduce herself to the man. She bowed and proudly declared her name was Lunathia Hassel. The companion's expression shifted quicker than a chameleon. Lunathia noticed the confusion washing over her. She asked, "Is something wrong?" The woman hid her lips behind her fan, apologizing like someone caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Knox jumped in, equally curious about their reason for showing up at the estate. Turns out he was there to chat with the Emperor about some political mumbo-jumbo. The companion admitted she had flubbed the date of the tea gathering with the Empress. Luna couldn't believe the Empress was pushing through her duties, even with her health hanging by a thread. The Marquis rushed off, citing a chat with His Majesty. The moment he vanished, his smile evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Knox and Lunathia bobbed their heads to Lady Rabian before making their exit. The woman measured them up like a fine suit, then waved her fan, stopping them in their tracks. She turned to Lunathia and said she had caught her attention. Rabian invited her for tea as her guest. Lunathia immediately sensed something was off with her invitation, like a cat smelling fish. But hey, it's hard to say no to the Emperor's favorite sidekick. She bowed graciously and said she'd be thrilled to join her. Lady Rienne flashed a grin and bid them farewell for now. Knox watched her retreat and remarked how tough saying no could be. That being said, he bluntly stated he would have snubbed that invite if he were in Lunathia's shoes. Rabienne was the top dog among the three concubines and had a reputation for being a handful. Knox figured she was the mastermind behind all those assassins creeping around the palace. Lunathia froze, realizing the tangled web she had just stepped into. Knox mentioned that even with Lyria in his corner, Gendel still didn't trust him one bit. The girl never imagined her palace life would come with such a side of drama. She remembered hearing her name tossed around before back at Hassel's digs. Luna tried to recall, but it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. A guard approached them on the way, letting them know they were expected. The newlyweds faced ahead with newfound confidence as the doors swung wide open. The girl's eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in the scenery. Contrary to her wild, Nicola beamed at Lunathia with a grin like she was a soothsayer reading fortunes. That line knocked Lunathia for a loop because she wanted zero part of that. The Empress caught the stunned expression on Lunathia's face, striding in with confidence as the doors swung wide. The girl's eyes lit up like a kid in a candy store surveying the room's decor. Contrary to her wild imaginations, a stunning woman was seated there. Nicola greeted Lunathia with a grin like she was some fortune teller or something. That line smacked Lunathia like a brick wall because she wanted none of that. The Empress noticed the shock written all over Lunathia's face and quickly clarified she was just pulling her leg. The girl completely froze, utterly flabbergasted on how to respond to that. The Empress mentioned that Gendel had filled her in on the Hassel family lore. Lunathia scrambled to remember if the prince had said anything about it. Knox swiftly shifted the topic and greeted her with a nod of respect. Mika told him to ditch the formalities because she found them utterly unbearable. Lunathia was once again struck by how much Gendal resembled his mother. Michella's warm, kind nature left her feeling all smiley inside. The Empress rose to her feet, deciding it was time to issue a personal apology. She beamed sweetly at the newlyweds and invited them to join her at the table. After that, they all settled in for tea, soaking up the serene vibes. Michaela apologized for their guard, not being ready for such a surprise attack. She mentioned that it was entirely the royal family's fault, and they were sincerely sorry. Lunathia told her there was no need to stress, saying none of the guests had gotten hurt, except for the poor royal guard. Naturally, they took the full brunt of it. Michaela vowed she would do everything possible to ensure this kind of disaster never happened again. Then, out of nowhere, she admitted that tracking down the traitor was a real headache. Basically, she dropped a hint that she was the target of the assassination attempt. Luna was blown away by how self-assured Michaela was. She also thanked Knox for his efforts and gave some props to his wife. Knox smoothly replied that he was thrilled to hear his wife getting praised, turned beet red at the very public compliment. Michaela smiled and waved off her thanks, claiming there was no need to thank her for just speaking the truth. She genuinely expressed how glad she was to see them today. Michaela added that her condition rarely allowed her to host shindigs like this. She grinned and said she hoped to share tea with them again soon. Once they were alone, Luna opened up to Knox with her thoughts. The clear resemblance between her and his son hit her like a ton of bricks. Knox just calmly replied that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Luna was itching to head back home and get back to her usual routine. To her shock, Knox insisted it was too early for them to return. He recalled spotting in her diary that she had a longing to stroll through a beautiful place. Knox was scratching his head about how to make that happen and decided to seek advice from Uriun. He also needed Gendel's input to figure things out. In the end, he decided to put everything on the back burner and go for that walk. Knox outstretched his hand and mentioned that the spot wasn't far. Meanwhile, the emperor's concubine was thoughtfully dissecting the meeting. She stretched her leg when she was informed that a guest had arrived. Rebene told her to let her in the moment she heard Rosalind was on her way. Next thing you know, the girl bursts into the room and freezes like a deer in headlights. She announced she brought her the fanciest jewelry. Rabian rolled her eyes in a bored way, doubting these trinkets would be worthy of her time. She added that Rosalind's ambition was something else, and chuckled, saying that was the soul, grinned, and dubbed her the most valued customer. She insisted she wanted to hear the tale before she showed off the jewelry. Rabian chuckled, amused that the girl actually believed in the Moonlight Meadow legend. Rosalind was taken aback that the woman was suddenly interested in this meadow. Rabian just claimed that she was inspired by her determination and repeated that same tale about the precious gem once again. Rosalind said she'd craft her the best piece ever if she could pinpoint the field. Rabian smirked, toying with Rosalind's offer. She blurted out that the girl should make her a tiara. It came out so bold that Rosalind's eyes nearly popped out of her head. Everyone knew that only the Empress could don a tiara in their kingdom. Reband had big dreams and wanted to snatch the Empress's crown for herself. That very day, she made her way to the Empress for tea. But, surprise me, the Empress greeted her in her typical manner, since they hadn't crossed paths in a month. Even so, Rian noticed how drastically she had changed. They exchanged their goodbyes, and she just happened to bump into Marquis. Their chat confirmed that Michaela was slowly fading away. Raban couldn't wait for that woman to kick the bucket. She had her sights set on being next in line for the throne. That's why she dreamed of having a tiara crafted for herself. They also discussed Mark Ilton living in the woods near the clearing. Rosalind was convinced that nothing could stop her from exploring the forest. Ribian was all for how fearless and bold she was. Rosalind froze when the concubine mentioned she had met her little sister. Turns out the girl immediately thought it was Cynthia. Ribian clarified that the girl looked roughly her age. Rosalind bit her lip, annoyed when she realized it was Lunathia. Rabian said she invited her to a tea party as a respected guest. Rosalind pretended to be cool about it, but she was fuming inside. Rabian smirked, pointing out that the two sisters didn't get along. She casually asked if she wanted to knock her down a peg. Rosaline couldn't resist the chance to take advantage of this, the kind Rabian could help her with. The concubine was skillfully playing her, using her to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, Lunathia was enjoying a stroll with Iltern. It seemed like he was set on showing her this sensational field of flowers. They managed to convince Knox to join them for a daytime walk. Knox asked if this was her first time taking a walk like this. She recounted how they almost whisked her away when she was a kid. But she fell ill. Her entire family decided to have a blast without her and just left her at home. Only Sol thought of her and brought back some flowers from their escapade. It hurt to hear about her family. The concubine was masterfully working her like a puppet to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, Lunathia was out for a stroll with Iltern. Looks like he decided to show her this jaw-dropping field of flowers. They somehow managed to convince Knox to join them on their daytime adventure. Knox asked her if this was her first ever walk like this. She opened up about almost going when she was a kid, but ended up getting sick. Her whole family decided to have a blast without her and left her at home. Only Sol remembered her and brought her back some flowers from their jaunt. Ouch, that had to sting hearing about her family. They chatted about moments that she wasn't part of. Knox, being the supportive guy he is, mentioned that he didn't have any cozy family memories either. With a grin, he suggested they should bring the crew along next time. Lunathia couldn't contain her excitement about his idea and enthusiastically agreed. The fragrance of swirling petals sparked her inspiration, and the view was simply jaw-dropping. She wanted to make this moment with Knox stick in her memory forever. She felt like she could take on the world knowing she had experienced something so special. As they left the clearing, she asked, "So where are we off to next?" The man pointed straight ahead and remarked their next destination was that way. The girl did a double take as the light bulb went off in her head about where he was leading her. Meanwhile, Sierra was wishing for some good vibes for the newlyweds. Urin chuckled, noticing just how head over heels Sierra was for Luna. The girl admired Luna's ability to keep smiling every day, despite her struggles. She totally got it. Being the middle kid in a big family, she knew firsthand how the youngest ones always got off scot-free, while the older ones had to share the load. That said, the Lunati family's woes were a whole different level compared to Sierra's. They were what landed poor Luna with her terminal illness in the first place. The girl raised her eyebrows when she saw a ruckus brewing in the street. Yep, the soldiers were back from their mission, and guess who was among them? Her sweetheart. He couldn't wait to check if they had snagged the moon herb. Sierra decided to tag along since she wanted to see her Roberto. Little did they know, a wild revelation awaited them that would leave their jaws on the floor. Meanwhile, Lunathia was on the next leg of their stroll. Knox guided her to an ancient church that looked like it hadn't been touched in ages. Yeah, that completely blew their minds. Meanwhile, Lunathia was now on the next leg of their little tour. Knox took her to a church that looked like it hadn't seen action in ages. Yandal filled him in on her backstory, dropping hints that they should steal some alone time together. This led Knox to reveal a place that held deep meaning for him. He remarked that this spot was the only one that truly resonated with him. He asked her if she wanted to check it out, reaching for the door handle. They both shot each other cautious glances as it creaked open. Luna stepped inside, taking stock of the place. Honestly, with how it looked, you'd never guess it was abandoned. Knox shared that secret wedding ceremonies used to go down here. This was the very spot where his dad popped the question to his real mom. Luna was caught off guard by how casually he spoke about it. Apparently, Knox assumed his little brother had let the cat out of the bag. She apologized for uncovering his secret, to which he waved her off, saying it was all good because he was going to spill the beans anyway. He had no desire to keep it hidden that his mom passed away during childbirth. His dad, stuff like this happens among nobles, but he felt bad for his brother's mom. Lunathia glanced at her hubby, surprised by how composed he was about such a sensitive topic. He grasped that their love surpassed logical reasoning. Thinking of all this, he felt a yearning to share his entire story with her. Lunatic's heart did a flip, realizing he trusted her with this. She smiled gently and nodded in agreement with Knox's viewpoint. He cheekily asked if she was even going to judge them for it. Lunatic saw no point since they both followed their hearts. That made the dude beam because he'd always dreamt of hearing those words. After a brief pause, he locked eyes with her and thanked her sincerely. Knox smiled with warmth, expressing how glad he was to have brought her to this special spot. So it turns out they ended up hanging out in the church until dawn broke. Realizing it was way too late to head back to the mansion, Luna suggested they crash at a hotel. That's when he noticed a moon raven soaring towards them. Panic struck her as she feared something had gone sideways. Knox did a quick scan of the situation, and his face fell faster than a lead balloon. Turns out Robert's squad had been on a quest for Moonlight Glade, but they returned looking beat up and not in the good way. Luna was in disbelief, utterly speechless. The craziest part, the soldiers didn't even have a scratch on them. Knox apologized and declared they needed to boogie back home as fast as possible to piece this mystery together. Luna agreed. Over the course of just 1 year, these folks became way more important to her than her own family, so she spent the whole ride home praying they'd be all right. As the newlyweds entered the mansion, they were met with utter madness. Urin apologized for crashing their romantic evening, claiming they thought they'd be stuck at the hotel for the night. Urin, in classic style, loved getting under their skin about it. Knox shot him down, warning he'd make him pay for his crude humor. The guy tossed his hands up, saying they already had enough chaos to handle. After that chat, they rushed into the room where the soldiers were sprawled out. Sierra immediately called for Luna while standing next to Robert. She quickly exclaimed how sorry she was for crashing their special moment. Luna waved her off, urging her to drop the apologies and just explain what on earth happened. Robert managed to stutter out that their squad had been following intel from the decoded tablets. Thanks to those, they stumbled upon a cave that no one had ever laid eyes on before. The rest of the soldiers shuddered at the thought of those horrifying bug sounds. Lunathia, with a cautious curiosity, asked them to spill about these bugs. They resembled moths, but in a twist of fate, they were colorful with bright red eyes. Weirdly, they didn't attack, but the scream they let out was something else entirely. Their ears were ringing from the dreadful shriek, which forced them to hightail it out of the cave. Knox crouched down next to them and asked if they reached the furthest section of the cave. They groaned, saying they couldn't, thanks to this gross, moldy fungus that emitted a rotten smell. So, Luna told her to skip the apologies and just explain what in the world was happening. Robert barely managed to say their team was tracking intelligence from the decoded tablets. Thanks to those, they stumbled upon a cave that no one had ever laid eyes on before. The other soldiers grimaced, remembering the blood-curdling screech of the bugs. Lunathia cautiously asked about these bugs. They resembled moths, but in flashy colors with bright red eyes. They didn't attack the soldiers, but oh boy, did they let out a horrible screech. The sound was so bad they hightailed it out of that cave. Knox crouched down beside them and asked if they made it to the deepest part of the cave. He said they couldn't because of some moldy fungus giving off a nasty smell. So, the soldiers were practically benched from the game. No beasts lurking in the cave, but nature sure was putting up a fierce keep out sign. Robert apologized for dropping the ball on the mission. He also said he was sorry for cutting their fun short. Luna was ready to back him up, but Knox swooped in first. He pointed out that Robert played it smart since they were there to scout the area. Robert successfully played the hero, keeping his buddies safe from harm. Urin chimed in that even though they didn't venture deeper, they snagged some seriously valuable intel. There was a solid chance that lunar grass was chilling out in that cave. Luna tensed up, realizing they made it that far. Urin suggested they really should gear up for the next round. While everyone was tossing around ideas, a brilliant thought sparked in Luna's mind. Everyone froze when they saw her hand shoot up. Dead serious, she volunteered to venture into that cave. Meanwhile, the Emperor's concubine was living large, sipping wine, surrounded by a squad of cuties. She glanced up when a familiar face greeted her with a grin, saying he never thought he'd find her here. She retorted that even fancy ladies need a little me time. Rabana started reminiscing about how much she missed the palace's peace and quiet. She also reminded him that he was the mastermind behind her discovering this rad spot. His eyes lit up as he recalled how they used to sneak in for secret rendezvous. The woman put down her glass calmly and said they had some serious business to discuss. She waved her hand at the guards, shooing them away. Once they were out of earshot, she whipped open her fan and offered him a seat. The woman glanced at her partner, eager for the scoop. She asked how his brilliant plan to deal with the queen was coming along. The man smirked, claiming everything was running as smooth as butter. He mentioned he even found some powerful allies, but kept the details under wraps. He figured they needed to take out the Empress while she was at her weakest. Rabena snapped back, annoyed he acted like she could be saved. She spilled the tea that the woman was sick, and it was only getting worse each day. Her jaw dropped when she caught wind of the prince hunting for Moonal herb to help her. The Maurice was equally floored when he realized she'd already heard the gossip. The woman called it a wild coincidence that there was a magic-infused stone just chilling in that field. She smirked, mentioning her jeweler was on the hunt for it on her behalf. The Marquis stroked his chin, totally into it, like a kid hearing the best bedtime story. Word on the street was that the prince had roped Maris Iltern into finding that field. Ribian pointed out that nobody said they were barred from joining the search party. The concubine was dead set on being the first to snag that field and get her hands on the stone. Greed blazed in the Marquis's eyes like he was ready to jump ship for treasure. As he offered to hunt down the field for her personally, he laid it on thick enough to make her crack a smile. Raben shot daggers at the Marchioness, calling it an enticing offer. Meanwhile, Lunathia was battling tooth and nail to save this mission. Just as we expected, everyone was freaking out over her outrageous plan. Knox flat out said it was a big fat no-go, insisting she was totally unfit for that kind of mission. Lunathia shot back that her condition made her immune to all that jazz. She made a solid point, but Knox wasn't taking any chances, plain and simple. Urin got why she wanted to jump in, but to everyone else it sounded like a train wreck waiting to happen. Lunathia froze, realizing she'd burned her bridges. She was on borrowed time, eager to prove her worth. It looked like Knox was starting to grasp she wasn't about to back off. She squeezed his hand, insisting she couldn't pass up an opportunity like this. Throwing in a bright smile, she promised to return safe and sound. No problem. Urin noticed how quickly Knox's mood flipped. He finally relented, giving her the rundown. He told her she had 1 hour before he'd come hunting for her. After she thanked him, Knox confessed he just couldn't say no to her. He remembered that sweet smile and promised he'd be right there waiting. The guy kept his peepers glued to her as she walked away. Lunathia agreed with everything he said and then bolted ahead. She snapped into focus like a switch had flipped, lighting her way with a flashlight. She even popped out her hearing aid before moving forward. To make matters worse, Luna's awful eyesight meant she didn't see the moths right away. She kept telling herself they weren't going to turn her into dinner. Even though they made this nasty chirpy sound, she could only hear echoes of it. And just like that, she cruised through the first tough part. She hadn't got too far when she tripped over some moldy fungus. She could still catch a whiff of that terrible gag-inducing stench. Still, it was bearable since her sense of smell was kind of a mess too. Even without using her gift, her 5 senses were slowly fading. After a few more steps, she had a mountain of stuff to memorize. Just a quick swipe of her hand, and boom, she stumbled upon this box. She peered at it like a detective hunting for clues. Luna was scratching her head trying to figure out how to pop it open since she didn't have a key handy. Then, just as if the universe had a timing coach, she noticed some writing on it too. It was a note for whoever had the goods, urging them to take it and keep going. She only caught fragments, but the end part was crystal clear. Luna figured that her great-great-great-grandma must have drafted that little nugget of wisdom. She squeezed the box like it was her lifeline, committing the message on the plaque to memory. Meanwhile, Knox and Urena were losing their minds. They were practically in a panic. This guy was ready to sprint after his lady right then and there. Consequences be darned. It took a marathon lecture from Urena to finally get him to simmer down and zip it. They were gasping for air when they turned back to the cave entrance. Lunathia came bolting towards them, safe and sound. Knox wasted no time and shot off after her, desperate to find out what on earth had happened to her in there. He started yanking off his coat, asking if she was hurt anywhere. She was itching to share the good news, but he tossed his coat around her like a knight in shining armor and said that could wait. Right then, he was laser-focused on making sure she got some solid rest. She tried to insist she was fine, but he was being as stubborn as a mule. Urena just smiled and whispered it was best not to pick a fight with Knox at this moment. He added that she could try to bring him back to Earth in her own way later. Lunathia glanced at him and realized he had been a total worrywart the whole time. She wanted to shake off his hand and put on something other than cave chic, but he was having none of that. The girl turned around and said she wanted some quality time with him. She adored the comforting warmth of his hands and the kindness radiating around her. She yearned to head back to the palace, take a breather, and spill all the juicy details she had learned. Finally, after what felt like eons, they made their way back before nightfall. As soon as their carriage rolled up, Sierra zipped out to greet them. Lunathia beamed and said the trip was a breeze. Robert gave her a smooth bow and said they were still haunted by nightmares. Knox commanded Sierra to get a warm bath and clean clothes ready for the girl. She dashed off to grab the letter that had come for Lunathia while they were gone. The maid handed over a letter covered in bizarre doodles. Lunathia was taken aback that anyone even bothered sending her mail. Turns out this letter was a midnight special from the concubine. She smirked, thinking about how she needed to prep for her guest's arrival. She decided to do this for her dear friend Rosalind and the Moonlight Glade. The woman grinned mischievously and mentally dared her to a little game. Meanwhile, Lunathia was just about done changing after her bath. The cave was dirtier than a pigsty, and she was freezing. Urena unexpectedly called out to her from the hallway. Stepping out of his office, he suggested they go inside to chat with Knox. The man calmly asked if she was done with her business. He invited her to sit next to him, saying he was all ears for everything she observed in that cave. She grabbed a cup and spilled the beans about the map that revealed the location of the moonlit clearing. Luna mentioned it was engraved on a tablet which she had memorized. Too bad. She couldn't take it with her, so she just had to commit it all to memory. Knox smiled and gently patted her on the head, saying she did a fantastic job. The girl turned bright red, feeling flustered by his praise. She blushed so hard she nearly forgot what she wanted to share. Luna added that aside from the map, there was also a message concerning the tablet. Moonlight Glade only popped up during a full moon, making the search feel like an episode of Survivor. After figuring out when the next full moon was, they began investigating the box. Urena discovered that it had a lock that opened in a super special way, but unfortunately, nobody had the slightest clue how. Lunathia suggested they take a breather before diving deeper into the search. She set her cup down and said that was all the info she managed to uncover. Urena flashed a grin and said they were one step closer to cracking the case now. Knox said they needed to shift gears and discuss a new problem, an invitation from Reben. They were shocked at how fast it had landed in their laps since the party was in just 3 days. Knox's expression turned serious, and he said he was getting some bad vibes about it. Lunathia noted that refusing it would be a major hit to the Iltern family's reputation. In the noble world, it was a rule of thumb you simply didn't say no to someone higher up the food chain. It was basically seen as a slap in the face, a total diss to whoever sent the invite. Lady Rebiane was well aware of this rule. Knox was totally on board with that. But getting left alone with Rabian was a risky venture. He'd even brushed off tea with Marquis Fand and his wife once. His mom had scolded him for it, which gave Lunathia a light bulb moment. She boldly declared she was going to that tea party. Knox was bummed that he couldn't protect her from those highfalutin nobility. Lunathia just smiled and told him to quit being silly because they were family. The next day, she strolled into the palace reception. She stepped into the room and greeted Rabian with utmost respect. Lunathia looked absolutely stunning in her attire, hard not to notice. You can bet she was surprised to find Rabian flying solo. She never imagined it would just be the two of them. Rabian put on a sickly sweet smile and thanked her for making the effort. Meanwhile, Sol decided to sneak into Lunathia's room once again. Forget all the letters. He was still gnawing on worry about his sister. Our dad has changed a ton. He's isolated himself, scared of what's ahead. Mom seems stuck in a time warp, refusing to chat with anyone. Even their adorable little sister Cynthia seemed off her game. She tracked down Sol yet again just to complain and unload her heart. The girl started acting all flirty again, just fishing for compliments about her cuteness. Sol swooped in with his usual charm, calling her stunning and delightful, like it's his 9 to 5. He used to roll his eyes at how full of herself she was, but now it's like he's tuned into a whole new channel. Ever since she met those other gals, her self-esteem took a nosedive, and she turned into a total rain cloud. Now he's got to pump her up 10 times a day, reminding her she's a real knockout. Sol practically recoiled from his sister when he caught sight of Rosaline sashaying towards them. He bolted from the room faster than a cat on a hot tin roof to catch her. The guy was over the moon she was back, especially with all the soap opera craziness in their family. Rosalind gave an all-too somber excuse, like she took a wrong turn on the road of misunderstandings. She mentioned she was only back to grab her stuff and would be hightailing it out soon. She thought it might be nice to chat with their dad and try to knock some sense into that hard head of his. Rosalind snorted, saying they shouldn't drag their elder sister down into their drama swamp. She took full advantage of Soleil's stunned silence and slipped out without another word. Cynthia was off like a shot, racing over to Sol, pleading with him to spill the beans on what he heard from their sis. But he was so dazed, he felt like a deer in the headlights. He always thought they were a sitcom perfect family. Turns out Lunathia was onto something all along. For the first time, Sol got the light bulb moment about why she bolted from the family. Meanwhile, Lunathia was stuck in her own little pickle with Rianne. She plopped down across from him and feigned surprise. Ribian grinned and said she wanted to have a heart-to-heart with her on the down low. Lunathia totally had no clue what was about to unfold at this tea party. Even without her sense of smell, the heavy incense scent practically knocked her over. Ribian fessed up that she was tight with her big sister. Lunathia's brain finally kicked in. She recognized the name royal concubine Rosalind straight away. She added that Rosalind always spilled the family tea to her. Luna chimed in, saying she heard from her sister that she was the second princess of the Alban kingdom. Rabienne nodded in agreement, revealing she became a concubine to keep her country safe and sound. Her grin turned a bit crooked when she mentioned he had zero interest in concubines. She added that he was all about his wife, and those were just titles. After that, she caught on that Lunathia was avoiding her tea like it was a bad date. Lunathia had to take a sip just to avoid being rude. Raban kept a fake smile glued on her face, waiting for her to drink up. After a beat, she casually mentioned that she was a tad different from the other concubines. She came right out and stated that she was gunning to change her situation. Luna froze, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over her. She quickly guessed that something funny had been dropped into her tea. Her vision went all fuzzy, and she kept seeing things do the cha-cha in her line of sight. Rabian stood up, figuring Lunathia was already feeling the caffeine crash. She explained it was the effect of some fancy white incense designed in her kingdom. "Just a whiff of this stuff," the concubine said, playing. She noticed it wasn't hitting her like a freight train. That's why she tossed those seeds in the tea to really crank things up a notch. She smirked, thinking Lunathia's taste buds were probably fried so she wouldn't catch the bitterness. "Ribbon," she said, naming the Master Knox, and Lunata repeated it like a parrot. She locked eyes with Lunathia, waiting for her to spill all the juicy deets about Moonlight Glade. After a while, she jolted awake, thinking she'd been chatting with Knox about Moonlight Glade. A flash of memory flickered in her mind, the haze mixing with his face. She lifted her head and saw rain hanging over her like a concerned bird. The girl was so startled she almost levitated off the couch. The concubine said she had passed out during the tea party, and thanks to that, Luna could barely piece together the jigsaw puzzle of events. She clutched her head, feeling like it was going to burst at the seams. At first, she thought it was just the fatigue piling up from the last few days. The girl scrambled to leap up from the couch and apologized. She bowed and said she needed to skedaddle. Raban flashed a predatory grin and said she had a blast with her. She waved goodbye to the girl, hoping for another round like this. Jendel happened to spot Lunathia from his office window. He was scratching his head over why she'd shown up at the palace out of nowhere. He sensed something was off right away, since the family never pulled her into the palace fun. Lunathia was mentally kicking herself for dozing off during such a crucial meeting. She tried to latch onto the convo details, but something else caught her attention. She turned around to see Lord Suk with Ruby tagging along like a shadow. The girl said she'd come to the palace because a concubine sent her an invite. She was relieved to bump into them both after such an overwhelming meeting. Suk explained he was escorting Ruby to invite Her Majesty to a fancy dinner. Luna's jaw dropped when he casually mentioned the formal feast. Ruby said it was an event her family threw every year. All the big wigs gathered to chat about everything that's been going on in the country over the year. Luna recalled how her mom always had her heart set on attending, but their family never scored an invite. Suk was pumped that they ran into each other today. Then he whipped out a letter from his pocket, presenting it to her like a magic trick. Ruby turned a shade of red when he said he was giving the invite to Lady Lunathia. Unlike his brother, Ruby wasn't keen on seeing Knox at the swanky dinner. Luna decided to steer the ship smoothly by thanking Ruby for the invite. Ruby put on a poker face like she wasn't, flustered and attempted to shoot back with some sass. Yet you could totally tell she was trying to keep it cordial. Luna quickly skimmed over the invite to check the date. And guess what? The dinner's on the night of the full moon. She was completely taken aback by Lady Ruby's syrupy sweet invitation. Ruby noticed the girl's bewilderment and said she wasn't inviting them to form a besties club. Luna, dinner's set for the night of the full moon. She was totally taken aback by Lady Ruby's overly sweet invitation. Ruby noticed the girl's confusion and quickly added she hadn't asked them to become besties. Luna just flashed a grin and decided to chat things over with Knox. The girl totally missed the piece of paper that took a dive to the floor. She snatched it up quickly, only to find it was a guest list. Lunathia scrutinized the list of highfalutin aristocrats like she was hunting for gold. Her jaw nearly hit the floor when a name she recognized jumped out at her. She just couldn't wrap her head around why her dad, who'd always been the wallflower, suddenly made the VIP list. She dashed over to Ruby to get the lowdown on why her dad was crashing the party. Ruby sheepishly admitted she had no clue Nicholas was her father. She became a statue when Suk posed the question of who backed the Viscount. After a quick brain tumble, Ruby remembered it was Maris Sloucheria who threw his name in the hat. That little nugget of info sent Lunathia's already bewildered brain into overdrive. There was no way she could fathom why a guy like Maris would even look at her dad twice. Determined to dig deeper, she asked if the Emperor's family was in on this invitation fiasco. Lord Suk confirmed that the Empress and her son were on the list. He added with a furrowed brow that he was genuinely worried about Her Highness's health. She had appeared a tad under the weather during their last meetup. Ruby snapped back, reminding him she was more concerned. She instructed the servants to alert her the moment he felt off or acted all funky. Lunathia pondered his remark about the sickly Empress. It dawned on her that life is more fragile than a soap bubble. The girl also felt a twinge of worry about her dad's mysterious benefactor. She quickly retied the list and handed it back to Ruby, thanking her. Told the servants to let her know the second he decided to feel poorly or started acting strange. Lunathia contemplated his words about the Empress looking puny. She realized their lives could be cut short any time now. She also had a bad feeling about her father's backer. The girl swiftly retied the list and handed it back to Ruby, also graciously thanking her for allowing her to see it. Luna beamed goodbye and said she'd be eagerly awaiting her invite. Once she was solo, she couldn't shake off the weird vibes between Marquilla and Lady Reuben. She contemplated using her special skills, but she figured Knox wouldn't be too thrilled about that. It was only then that she realized she had wandered around like a lost puppy in the palace. Cautiously glancing around, she accidentally stumbled upon the racket of swords clashing and traced it back to the knight's practice grounds. Lunathia ducked behind a pillar, turning into a covert operative as she started observing the knights. She did a double take when she recognized Rondell. The poor guy was really grinding away at his skills after that embarrassing loss. He tried every move in the book, but ended up flat on his back like a defeated pancake. After getting schooled, he cheekily threw down a challenge for a rematch. It was clear that getting the boot from the 2nd Division gave him the kick in the pants he needed. Lunathia couldn't remember the last time she saw him. Oh, right, it was at the ball. Rondell claimed his fam almost disowned him over that blunder. Still, he took losing as a life lesson. Finally, he realized he'd done squat in the grand scheme of things. To her surprise, he admitted he owed his achievements to his ex-fiancée. Lunathia's brain struggled to process that. He couldn't keep riding the shame train, letting a woman do all the heavy lifting, and he hadn't even spoken to her since. Now he dreamt of apologizing when he was tougher. With all that juicy gossip, Lunathia was ready to bail. She remembered Rondell as a guy who relied too much on her strength, but now, thanks to Knox's training, he was turning things around. His struggles didn't matter to her anymore, but it did give her a fresh perspective on him. So she finally cruised back home as the sun dipped below the horizon. Knox was not pleased to see her rolling in late. He was definitely about to lose it, saying he was ready to storm the palace to drag her back. His heart nearly took a nosedive when she casually mentioned she had fainted at the tea party. She attempted to convince him not to summon a doctor and just cut to the chase. Knox was chill with that, but she still needed to give some love to her guest. Luna's jaw dropped when she found out she had a surprise. He let her have it, saying he was on his way to the palace to drag her back. His heart nearly took a nosedive when she mentioned she'd passed out at the tea party. She tried to explain to him. Before she knew it, some dude just popped into the room like he owned the place. It was Sol beaming from ear to ear, and she hadn't seen him since the ball. He scooped her into a big hug and said he just wanted to check in on her. The poor kid instantly regretted it when Knox grabbed him by the scruff, going all protective brother bear on him. Knox let him have it for crashing uninvited and making a beeline for his fiancée. Lunathia was ready for this kind of action from her brother and told him to ease up. The girl bent down and looked up at her brother, flashing a calm smile as she suggested they have a chat. The kid instantly regretted it when Knox grabbed him by the scruff of his neck. He tore into him for crashing uninvited and lunging at his fiancée. Lunathia was bracing for this sort of behavior from her brother and told him to let go. The girl crouched down and looked up at her brother. She flashed a calm smile and suggested they chat in her room. The moment they had privacy, Sol found himself totally flabbergasted by her fiancé's demeanor. He described the 30 minutes they shared as an absolute trial by fire. The girl decided to unveil a different facet of her beloved man to him. She explained that he was the sweetest guy she'd ever known. Sol bought it simply because she believed it. Out of nowhere, he threw her a curveball and asked if she felt more at home here than back at the Hassel estate. Lunathia diverted her gaze, stating she had discovered her joy right here. It looked like her answer finally put Soleil's worries to bed. He bowed deeply, genuinely. Here was better than back at the Hassel estate. Lunathia looked away, saying she'd found her happiness right here. It seemed her answer finally eased Sol's worries. He bowed sincerely, apologizing for using her as a stepping stone to gain power. Luna felt like her ears were playing tricks on her. She never thought she'd hear something like that, not in a million years. He poured his heart out, saying he finally saw his family for who they truly were after she left. Only now did he understand the living hell she endured all those years. Sol kept his chin to the ground, saying he totally got how she must feel. She urged him to look up and retold the harrowing tale of nearly losing 5 of her senses, thanks to their now grasped the living nightmare she'd endured all those years. Sol kept his head down, acknowledging how she must feel. She urged him to look up and said she'd almost lost 5 of her senses because of their demands. Sol was stunned. He couldn't believe the damage was that extreme. It took him a hot second to process what she was getting at. Lunathia clenched her fists and declared she was going to lay the truth down on him right here and now. She basically told him she was toast unless the moonflower could come to her rescue. Sol started trembling like he was as green as a leaf when it hit him that this whole mess was totally his fault. He recalled swiping some ancient book from her when they were kids, which is why she couldn't decipher those notes. Yep, all on him. Dropping to his knees, he started begging like a puppy for her to forgive him for all that he had done. Sol was sobbing at her feet, pleading for any way to make it right. Luna stood up, saying that his guilt was enough to satisfy her. She grabbed his shoulders like a coach and said he had to figure out what to do with this info. She firmly believed those folks wouldn't buy into something like that. They needed to understand the bill for their bliss. She was taken aback when he casually mentioned that her dad and Rosalind were acting all sorts of strange. Luna raised an eyebrow, saying something big was brewing, and urged him to spill the juicy details. Meanwhile, Sierra was giving the cups in the kitchen a look that could melt steel, completely lost in her thoughts. She was so focused that even the other maid noticed her mood. Turned out she was mulling over whether to serve the cakes and tea right then and there. Part of her was itching to serve them, but she knew Nukes wanted Soleil out of the picture. She even toyed with the idea of, let's say, tweaking her brother's tea recipe. Sierra gave the container a little shake, thinking it was a brilliant plan. You'd never guess her shock when Prince Gandalf popped up right behind her. He informed her he'd just rolled into the Maris estate and that he was on his way to see Knox, but got snagged into a delightful chat over some tasty tea. With a playful wink, he remarked that was the whole reason he came. Sierra was practically vibrating from the surprise and offered to whisk him over to Knox. She practically hustled him out of the kitchen and led him straight to Knox. He announced he had a mission for the Marquis of the Lunar Eclipse. Apparently, an Allied ship was set to dock in 3 days, heading south across the seas. Knox frowned like he just bit into a sour lemon, asking why he even needed to meet them. Jandel explained that Maris Fond had constructed a bridge of friendship with that country. The fancy dinner was also an excuse for them to unwrap presents. Knox had never been to one of those Fond family shindigs before. The prince chimed in that it was because Madame Ruby had a dislike for him. He added that his parents were initially supposed to meet them, but unfortunately, Jendel's mom had taken a turn for the worse just yesterday. Thank goodness no one knew she was out of commission. It could have stirred up a hornet's nest of gossip if no one from their clan met the guests. That's why Knox was totally stuck on this request, one he couldn't exactly brush off. Jendel was amazed at how quickly his buddy agreed to it. The prince snapped his fingers like a magician and demanded to see him with a +1. That's why he suggested Knox should bring Luna along. Knox's enthusiasm for that idea was about 0, knowing things could get crazy there. Just then, Luna strolled in to meet the prince. Jendel grinned and urged her to join them. She bowed, apologizing for her lateness. Knox jumped right in, bombarding her with questions about how her talk with her brother went. Right before parting ways, she told him to remember something significant. He asked her to shoot him a letter as soon as her dad and Rosalind started acting wonky. Solely agreed, then got all awkward and asked if he could still be her twin brother. Lunatic was taken aback by how much that meant to the kid. She smiled and said he was the only family she had in this hellhole. Before she took off, she advised him to think things through before making any hasty moves. She gave him a warm smile, calling it sisterly advice. Soleil clenched his fists like he was lifting weights, looking determined, and promised he'd give it his all. After that, he pivoted toward the exit, dropping a goodbye. Just before he left, he trembled a bit and asked her not to kick the bucket. She couldn't promise anything, but realized this was the first time she genuinely attended to family business. Knox gently rubbed her shoulder, giving her a small smile. Jandel swooped in to interrupt, teasing them as if they were the real newlyweds. He claimed he was thrilled they were connecting so well and offered her a seat next to him. Knox, following suit, sternly warned him not to push his luck. Jendel flashed a playful grin and asked Lunathia if she had a thing for the ocean. His nonchalance totally caught her off guard. The prince said sailing across the open sea was exhilarating, almost like he was trying to reel her in before revealing what was really going down. The girl awkwardly looked down, admitting she had never seen the ocean before. After a moment, she said she'd love to see it. Knox was not thrilled with the prince's attempt to play tricks on Lunathia. The prince chuckled and confessed he was a softie when it came to his wife. With a sly wink, he mentioned he was really counting on them to tackle this mission. Knox quickly gave the girl the lowdown on what their task involved. He added that the Fan family was also in the mix, so they really didn't have the option to say no. Urin smirked and remarked he couldn't believe Knox even got invited. Before taking off, he stated that it wouldn't have happened without Lunathia. Lunathia shot back, asking if he seriously thought she would ditch them. She said she could hang back at the mansion if he just said the word. He contemplated for a moment and asked if she wanted to see the ocean. He recalled promising to show her some breathtaking spots. The girl immediately caught on that he was referring to those entries in her diary. She was grateful for everything she'd shared with him and didn't want to be greedy. He'd already done so much. It totally threw her for a loop. The prince said it was incredible to sail on a ship through the vast open sea. It was like he was trying to hook her before revealing what was really up. The girl awkwardly looked down, admitting she'd never set eyes on the ocean. After a moment's thought, she said she'd love to see the ocean. Knox wasn't thrilled about the prince trying to play games with Lunathia. And the prince chuckled and confessed he was a softie when it came to his wife. Giving a cheeky wink, he mentioned he was counting on them for this mission. Knox briefly laid out what their task would entail. He added that the Fan family was also in the loop, so they really couldn't say no. Urin smirked, saying he couldn't believe Knox even got a golden ticket. Before he left, he said it wouldn't have happened without Lunathia. Lunathia shot back, asking if he was actually questioning her commitment to come along or not. The girl said she could just chill at the mansion if he just threw her a bone. The guy scratched his head, then asked if she was up for a trip to see the Big Blue. He remembered vowing to show her some jaw-dropping spots. The girl immediately caught on that he was referring to those snippets in her diary. She was already counting her blessings for all the wild adventures they'd had together and didn't want to push her luck. He'd already gone above and beyond. For someone who was about to go blind. Finally, she beamed and said she'd tag along with him. Urin was over the moon about her choice and hopped in to support it. He added that everything would be just peachy, even if some hiccup came up. After a bit, Lunathia could finally see the vast ocean. She never dreamed it was actually this massive. Knox mentioned they rigged an Imperial battleship to keep those pesky pirates at bay. They thought they might as well show off a little for the Allies while they were at it. Luna inquired how soon they'd reunite with the rest of the fleet. She confessed that just picturing the sheer enormity of the world left her breathless. Seeing her grin, Knox figured bringing her here was totally worth it. He proposed they sail over the waves together after they located the Moonflower. Luna couldn't shake off the memory of her twin brother's previous request. With all this in her head, she felt a growing desire to truly experience life. Just then, a sailor yelled about fog creeping in from the southwest. Knox stiffened, knowing that's where the Allies were supposed to be heading from. Lunathia had always been told the sea was a total powder keg waiting to blow. She even toyed with the idea of attempting to glimpse the future through Knox. He snapped her back to reality, warning her not to lean so far over the railing. She really didn't want to tap into her powers, but things were getting dicey. She shut her eyes, mentally crossing her fingers that nothing bad would come of it. Another crew member announced they'd spotted an Allied ship. The craziest part was that there wasn't a soul aboard. Knox cautiously suggested they should get closer to investigate. Luna tried to sound the alarm about the danger, but they were in too deep. He gently brushed her cheek and asked her to hang tight while he checked out the ship. His steady tone was soothing, but she still felt that gnawing unease. She begged him to at least let her peek into the future before he left. Knox shook his head, reminding her that he wanted her to only wield her gift during emergencies. He meant those moments when she really needed to defend herself. She tried to protest, but he showed off his wicked-looking sword. Knox smirked and said, "This bad boy works on land and sea." Just a couple of minutes later, he had a crew ready to scope it out. Once they boarded the Allied ship, they found it was totally deserted. Just like Knox said, he suggested they split up and search the ship for any little nugget of information. The second he stepped into the cargo hold, he stumbled upon some wild beast. It was a tiger only found in warmer climates. Knox figured this critter had been a party prop for the Fawn family. He knew it was a simple wish and couldn't help but picture Luna's delight. The guy sprang to his feet the instant he heard a strange noise. Peering between the bulky crates, he saw something odd. There were 4 tied-up servants left alone in the hold. He introduced himself as a guy from the Sunrise Empire and asked if they hailed from Mura. One of them mentioned they got caught in the fog and then jumped by bandits. It was only at the last second. Unfortunately, he figured this out too late as a thug snuck up behind him. Meanwhile, Lunathia was watching the scene unfold with rising anxiety. She tensed when a crew member shouted they were being overrun by pirates. In the blink of an eye, a bloodthirsty bandit's knife plunged right through his back. Luna froze, realizing they were completely surrounded. One of the pirates yelled, all hyped up, that they'd commandeered the ship and taken hostages. They demanded all the gold in exchange for the folks. They attempted to drag Luna away, but she couldn't shake her worries about Knox. Back on land, Jendel was oblivious to the surprise attack. His mother hoped the Alliance landing would go smoothly. She was still fretting about the Ilton family, but the prince assured her everything was all right. Yet, the thought of pirates crashing the party gave her the willies. Jendel chuckled, saying she didn't know the half of it when it came to his best bud. There were heaps of tales about how fearless he was on the battlefield. Folks often compared him to a wild tiger or a wolf like all the time. He added that Knox turned into a beast when he had people to look out for. The prince squeezed his mom's hand and urged her to focus on getting better. He offered her a comforting smile and said he'd be waiting to hear from their friends. Meanwhile, Luna tried to settle her nerves, reminding herself that pirates were nothing next to her husband. She recalled how confident he looked stepping onto that ship. That gave her a glimmer of hope, but her heart was still heavy with worry. As the pirates pieced together, she was some high society lady. They got all riled up, bickering about the best way to handle her. One of them was fantasizing about what he'd do to her when they got back to his place, but he was just about to experience a rude awakening. They started trembling in their boots when they realized their time was running out. Before they knew it, they were sprawled out on the deck, bleeding from some gnarly wounds. All this went down right in front of their buddy, who was totally losing it. Knox was raging that these lowlifes even dared to lay eyes on his Lunathia. The pirate tried to duck behind the hostages, not realizing Knox had already freed them. The guy kept tossing out threats, thinking it was going to save his hide. Knox just calmly raised his sword and stated that his suspicions were spot on. He informed the pirate that he had taken care of every last one of his crew. The thug felt a chill run down his spine. Gazing at the lifeless bodies, he stared Knox dead in the eye and called him a total monster. Lunathia was finally able to breathe easy when she spotted him safe and sound. She nearly jumped out of her skin when she spotted the enemy hiding with a gun. The guy was ready to blow his target away right in the back. Lunathia screamed at the top of her lungs. She nearly leaped out of her skin when she spotted the bad guy lurking with a firearm. The dude was poised to ambush his foe right in the back. Lunathia let out a blood-curdling scream. He called her his little treasure. He turned around faster than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs when he heard his wife's frantic shout. In a split second, he dodged the pirate's bullet like a pro. The robber shrank back into the corner, shaking in his boots when he realized he had missed his chance. To his utter shock, the waves started tossing the ships like a salad dressing blender. The sudden storm sent that scoundrel right off the deck. He splashed into the open sea, which pretty much guaranteed he wasn't dying in style. It looked like Luna was right there with him, not managing to grab onto a floating noodle or anything. The next thing she knew, she was diving headfirst into the deep blue, like it was a swimming pool, with no lifeguard in sight. Knox's heart skipped a beat, and he turned to stone, worrying for his wife's safety. As she descended into the watery depths, Luna felt like she was tossed into a feeling-free zone. All she could think about was whether this was how her story was destined to end. She had almost forgotten she had someone ready to battle the ocean for her. He swam towards her, wrestling the sea for her life like it was a wrestling match at the county fair. In the end, he actually snagged her from a tragic diving board moment. When she came to, she saw a massive tiger. Despite the big kitty's toothy grin, she shrieked in fear like she just spotted a spider. The maid apologized and explained that she let the wild things out of their cages to check if they'd been training. She smiled and reassured Luna that they were professionals at not munching on humans. Lunathia instantly responded with a grin when she noticed the friendly beast. Before she could even step towards it, the tiger gave her a lick that was so slobbery she forgot all about Knox. He slicked back his wet hair and declared that all the pirates were now their lovely guests. She could finally let out a sigh of relief, blissful that everybody was A-OK. Knox asked if she had been using her special powers. The girl self-examined and announced there were no magical upgrades. Knox was over the moon that her hearing aid was water-resistant. He extended his hand, suggesting she go and put on something dry. Lunathia beamed and agreed, since she looked like a drowned rat in her soggy outfit. Finally, they could kick back in their cabin without worrying about pirates or waves for a bit. Lunathia graciously thanked Knox for rescuing her. With a grin, she said that Mr. Knox had saved her yet again. To her surprise, he shot back that she had saved his life first. He recalled that if she hadn't yelled, he would have been fish food. He said it was only the husbandly thing to do. The way he declared it made Luna feel all warm and fuzzy inside again. She smiled and said if that's the case, then a wife should help her husband too. She got lost in thought, bemoaning what it was like to experience a world devoid of feelings. She knew that the dreadful day of emotional drought was drawing nearer. Luna confessed that her desire to live with Knox was still burning bright. She felt like she was sinking again, which is why she felt the need to spill her guts. Overwhelmed with emotion, he scooped Lunathia up for a bear hug that took her by surprise. Those heartfelt words were tough for him to muster, but he swore he'd find the moonflower. In the end, they actually pulled off the mission to rendezvous with their allies. Later, Jendel slapped a bounty on the pirates who were stirring up trouble. After that, Knox announced he was done taking requests from Jendel. Even so, Prince Jendel was as chill as a cucumber. After a while, the night of the full moon finally rolled around. After arriving at the Marquis banquet, she decided to hunt for moonflowers. She was also nosy about what her father and Rosalind were scheming. The girl pressed her hand to her heart, wondering if luck would be on her side and she'd stumble upon the flowers. She felt like her fate was finally resting in her hands. Luna nearly jumped out of her skin when Sierra yelled her name. The girl spun around, lost in thought, and asked the maid to repeat herself. The maid held out 2 pretty boxes and asked which necklace she preferred. Luna said she was good, but everything felt like it was underwater. After that, she pointed to the box the maid was holding. The maid beamed at her choice, announcing it matched her dress to a T. She assured her with lots of enthusiasm that she'd make her look like royalty. Luna smiled, realizing she finally had folks who cared about her. It was these wonderful people who fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. Even if everything came down to that night, she'd keep hoping for a brighter tomorrow until the very end. Meanwhile, Mr. Knox was all geared up for the feast. Luna thanked him for hanging in there and couldn't help but notice their outfits matched perfectly. Knox paused thoughtfully, gazing deep into her eyes. Urine repeated the compliment Knox should have given her. Although Knox wasn't always the smoothest talker, she still appreciated the compliment. She agreed, saying she did look pretty adorable. She added that she hated the idea of parting ways so soon. Luna was aware she'd need to switch into something lighter before heading out to find the Moon Meadow. Knox was really channeling his inner gentleman for this fancy shindig. Right now, she was holding his hand while he proclaimed the night was special. He gazed at his wife, a determined sparkle in his eye, and suggested they make a move. Urine waved and said he'd catch up with them later. He told them to go on and enjoy their dinner first. After that, the lovebirds made their way to the carriage for the dinner party. She froze like a deer in headlights when the Marquis suddenly started gushing about her dress. Knox leaned in closer to her ear and whispered that she looked fabulous in it. Then he turned away as if it was a small fry, almost like he was afraid of her reaction. Lunathia gave him a genuine smile and thanked him for the sweet compliment. After a bit of time, the newlyweds hopped into the carriage for a journey to the dinner bash. She hit the brakes when the Marquis suddenly started spouting off about her dress. Knox leaned in close to her ear and whispered that it looked stunning on her. Then, he acted like it was no biggie, almost as if he was scared of her reaction. Lunathia flashed him a genuine grin and thanked him for the sweet words. After a bit, they finally made it to the venue, and Lunathia was bouncing off the walls with excitement over this fabulous event and the crowd of guests. Then it hit her like a ton of bricks that the imperial family's security detail was packing some serious heat. But hey, at least the Empress looked like she'd just stepped off a spa retreat, thank goodness for that. Lunathia scanned the room, her eyebrows knitting together as she wondered who else might be crashing the party. That's when she locked eyes with her dad, grinning like he just found a winning lottery ticket, and her mom, who looked like she might have skipped a few too many dinners. This immediately made her think of Soleil and Cynthia back at home, probably binge-watching something ridiculous. But what really had her scratching her head was Rosalind acting all kinds of strange. Just then they heard Knox, her little brother, cheerfully calling out like he was a walking happy pill. She gave a little bow and thanked him for the invitation, and he casually dropped that it was Ruby who had invited them and that she'd be popping by soon. The Lord looked pretty pleased that Knox was along for the ride too. But Lunathia couldn't help but notice the Lord suddenly turned as red as a tomato, like he was about to spill a big secret. Her eyes went wide when she found out his mother was here as well, and before she could blink, that lady was summoning him like a magician calling forth a rabbit. She wanted to know who he was chatting with, and let me tell you, her tone was sharp enough to slice through steel like she was ready to start a one-woman war.